then of course no human ever initiated that. But that doesn't mean that just because a human initiated it, it means it wasn't from God. So you got to be
Correct.
careful.
I
You got
mean,
to be
that
careful, right? So somebody has to be the first person to be like, hey, you know what? You know what we should do? Let's go build the third temple. That doesn't automatically make it heretical.
correct. I mean, there's in halacha, in halacha, there's this idea also. It was talking about. I'm just giving in a specific case, but it was talking about something that Jews had to do with actually some sort of hairstyle, which Jews shouldn't do because it resembles resembles something that has to do with idol worship. There was a sort of hairstyle that idolaters would do, and then it basically says that at some point when a majority of Jews start doing it, then once it passes sort of like a tipping point, then it's no longer culturally considered as something that the idolaters do, and then it's not a problem anymore. Then you ask yourself, like, okay, what about the first 10 people that did it? Like, are they retroactively now, like, sin-free? Because like now once it became the consensus, it's no longer a problem. And this is also why the rabbis are always reactive, right? A rabbi is not going to come out right now and say, like, today I abolish this. We're more lenient about this thing. I don't even want to use the word lenient. Is once the society phase shifts and shows that it's serious enough, then there could be a serious discussion about certain leniencies or with regards to halacha and how we're looking at certain things as well. So you could come and say that this is not for heaven's sake until it gets to a critical mass where it is for heaven's sake. And then at that point, that's my point, saying, like, in my eyes, the miracle the miracle of that happening in Israel means that it both happened from the people bottom up, and then the authorities, as in all the authorities, have to allow that to happen as well, right? So the court systems and the electrical companies and the water companies, all of them have to come together to actually do this as well. That is a miracle, right? And you have to ask yourself, and like, unless you're saying, like, no, the miracle I'm looking for is, outside of nature, so to speak, right? I want like the sea splitting. And then too, you could talk about how these are all things that could happen naturally. Miracles are all about, and this is an idea that is expressed in Judaism, a miracle is more about the timing of these things, right? The fact that the timing happened exactly then. And when all these things occurred is what makes it so miraculous, right? And in that sense, if that's happening at that point, right, then I would take a step back and say, okay, so if the timing of all of this happening, right, if this goes back to your question now, why I at least believe that we're living like, biblical times right now, when you're looking at the map that's happening around you, when you are thinking about the ideas of the wars that are going on, the technologies that are being used. So, right, then you have to ask, like, what is going on, right? What should I be looking at these things? And at the same time, you have to weighing the fact that King Hezekiah could have been seen as the Messiah. The reason he wasn't the Messiah, though, was because he didn't recognize the miracle that God did for him, and he didn't sing thanks to him, right? God intervened, so to speak, and fought his enemy. Yet Hezekiah took that as sort of like a natural win. And that's a problem, right? So when we have an insane amount, hundreds and hundreds of ballistic missiles being shot at Israel, and of course it has to do with technologies and Jordan and other countries also helping us with protecting like a shield wall from that. Nevertheless, the fact that works, the fact that there's like a 90+% success rate, the fact that things that fell almost hit nothing. I'm saying that almost because there's things that did hit. Either way, that's a miracle. And if we come and say, like, no, God, the miracle we're looking for, like, when I'm making the technology, anyone would say, listen, having a 70% success rate would be amazing, right? So if I'm giving you a 90% success rate, you would say, like, that's nuts. We would never have imagined that. So you could come and say, like, okay, doesn't that qualify as like an amazing miracle? Something you would never have imagined to happen, managing to perform like that all the time. And the timing of it was amazing, right? It didn't happen on a dry run. It didn't happen when the Boston Dynamic robot is doing the dance. It happened in go time when it had to happen, when all the missiles shot. That's when it had to happen, and it all worked out every time, right? So that seems curious. But then people are like, no, that's just like, it's impressive, but like whatever. They're like, okay, so then it's a question to us: do we really want it, right? Do we want to be redeemed? That's a different question.
Yeah, and I understand your position, Hezi, and I definitely am more sympathetic to your position than my understanding of Jacob's position. It's just I understand that within the Orthodox Jewish community, there is a general skepticism due to various halakhic and historical implications of mankind trying to redeem, having a more active process in redemption, and yeah, it's definitely an interesting discussion to be had. It's just that even though I'm more sympathetic to your position, I'm in a position where I really feel like I would like to learn more about the various arguments on either side.
Today.
Sure. You should just realize, like, you're right, though. Like, we've been burnt. We've been burned badly by this, obviously, right? Think of Shabtai Tzvi most specifically. False prophets is something that's obviously very, very scary. And I could also understand Jacob's fear, so to speak, were people thinking that way, right? Because that could get completely out of control. I mean, I have like this little pin that I wear on my lapel of the temple. And unfortunately, that's, it's become politicized, right? So there's some that look at that as being like, oh, you want to, blow up the temple mosque and like a hostile takeover and a theocracy. But a Jewish state and halachic state, to me, doesn't. I don't express that as how you would see a classic theocracy, and I also don't see that I don't see that being achieved through blood and war. Yeah. I see that as like a healing thing and something that was going to be desired by all. However, I do want that to be in the consciousness. I don't want the idea of the temple as something to be like, yeah, this is something that we just basically pray for thousands of years, but like, we just keep on saying it. And this really also has to do with this also has to do with the fact, that we're in our war right now. When claims like the river to the sea or like, is this land yours? If you don't know what you're doing over here, if you don't have a vision, you can talk about like it's just like a state and like and since the nation states have been established, like there's like a legal element to that. But I'm talking about if you want to make a real claim, if you're not the colonizer, then who are you? What is your message? And if you don't have if you don't have a message to say, if you don't have something that you're hoping for, and again, that doesn't mean like, and I want to start zoning or I want to start make like architectural plans. Like we're far from that. But the idea that is something that we're longing for, and that is something that we want, and that is something that we think that we could actually achieve. And again, I think we achieve that by seeing the other, by making space for the other, which of course includes our Christian brothers and sisters, our Palestinian brothers and sisters. So that has to be, that's part of that conversation. So the TLC and the Noahide movement, all those are data points and moves towards, realization that we all have to converge in that house of prayer for all nations. And it doesn't look like just waiting.
Yeah. And then, so the second question I had for you, Hezi, and this is a little bit off topic, if that's okay, is you
mentioned
earlier...
ask Jonathan. Jonathan is
you can ask first, and I'll make the decision.
Well, so basically earlier, Hezi, you mentioned this notion of Judaism being pro-life. And I actually did have a question about what the Orthodox Jewish perspective on abortion is, because the reading I've done on this, and this is from a very limited perspective, of course, but the reading I've done on this seems to indicate to me that there are two perspectives within Orthodox Judaism. And so correct me if this is mistaken.
Rashi and the Rambam. So
to my understanding, the one position in Orthodox Judaism that I've heard is that abortion is allowed up until 40 days and obviously to save the life of the mother. And then I've heard some Orthodox Jews say that it's prohibited unless there's a direct threat to the life of the mother. Is this a correct understanding of the Orthodox Jewish position?
The last thing you said, though?
that it's banned in all cases except the life of the mother, in which case it's mandatory.
Yes, obviously, of course, has to do with the mother. The 40 days is the halachic point, right? Which we could see, like if you're looking in the ultrasound, then you could you could actually see these things. There's also discussion with the Ramban himself gets into this as well. But the rudimentary understanding you claimed is correct. Again, this is a very, very loaded and dense conversation.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
it's
and
just so the 40 days thing I heard is one view established in atonement, and then the other view is that even before 30 days, if it's prohibited unless there's a threat to the life of the mother. But I've heard that's considered a more conservative position within the Orthodox Jewish community.
You're right. There are some that don't see any difference between if it's 40 or 40 between before the 40 or after the 40 days, right? But there are those that are saying that even during the first 40 days, as in beforehand, like again, obviously in that stage as well. I don't remember though who I don't remember the exact source for that as well. But again, I'm sure there's a tremendous amount of information about that.
Yeah, yeah. And do you have a personal perspective on this?
just plead the fifth.
Why do you ask, Kirk?
I think
Are
no.
you,
I think the
Yeah,
context. Obviously,
Kurt, did you get somebody pregnant?
yeah.
No, I don't date.
I don't know. You're asking some funny questions here.
Yeah, I don't know. That's real on the nose.
Kirk, you gotta talk to someone.
So
I would probably be on the more, I would say, progressive side on that end.
Okay, so you would say that if it's before the 40 days, that it's okay.
If all the wife's involved, the history involved, the other kids are involved. There's many other questions involved in making
also,
that decision.
are we Jewish in this scenario or not? That
Correct.
also matters.
There's,
Yeah.
I mean, it also right. There's discussions about that about Noahides as well. But I'm bringing us back for a moment to the discussion again about the temple, where the three main opinions are Rashi, again, that I remember, and if anyone, or you could look online, you'll find that there's more, but there's Rashi, Rambam, and Ramchal. And Rambam clearly states that this has to be something that we are doing. I mean, Rambam holds that the holiness of the temple is still there right now. Like when the Rambam talks about, let's say, the halachot of Pesach, he gives the classic halachot that you see in other halachic texts, but then he suddenly goes into preparing the actual sacrifice, which everyone else stopped talking about. But as far as the Rambam's concerned, like our mindset should be that like any moment it could be built, and he doesn't even specify that it is that a prerequisite is Messiah, because he mentions how that the order of Messiah, the temple being built, these final days of redemption is not something that we know. We don't know the exact order, but he says that when we're in the position to build the temple, we should build the temple. Rashi famously says that, the term you're using, that is going to be from the sky and it's already going to be fully built. And I always joke around as someone that is in construction, who's setting up the Wi-Fi? How's all that's happening? Like it's just being dropped down and like everything's being connected automatically. Sure, it seems like an unnecessary miracle that would be happening, but of course that could something happen as well. The Ramchal looks at it as being both of these things that are together as well. That like if this is like there's there's a divine idea, there's a divine orientation, the fact that we want to come together, that we're taking the idea of the temple, of creating and unifying a place for the sacred, and we as a society understand that and embody that idea and then build that idea actually, then that is something that is built with that intention and then will be graced with God's presence as well. And that is a co-creation element, and that's very much what I personally believe in.
How you doing on time, Heather?
I still got some time. I didn't hear from my wife yet, so.
Yeah.
Hey.
Oh, real quick, is Benthorpe even allowed to be on here?
Is
Here he is, Kirk.
absorb a lot of BI here. I don't know. I guess we'll see. As long as the conversation stays focused on the topic that Jonathan wanted to discuss, I see no reason that people can't be invited.
Thanks.
So,
Talk.
so a question, Hezi. What is how are we gonna get 2 Shabbats in a row? Like how does that actually get done?
Again, my interpretation of the 2 Shabbats in a row wasn't necessarily to be taken literally, even though you could say that the idea of, let's say, the world taking on like a Sabbath day or an idea like that where we detox from technology is probably something that the world could adopt. Like, I think that's like a good idea. And maybe as we are growing now and as a society, Jonathan Haidt just has like new work about this, obviously about the effects of social media, like on humans and how bad that is. So, what movie that is, The Social Network, how we basically, I'm forgetting the name of that
The
guy.
Social
Tristan.
Dilemma.
Social Dilemma, right? That we've had already our first encounter with like AI 1.0, right? Which was like the social networks. And now we're like, we see now that the results of that were not great. And we're blindly going into like this next phase right now. So obviously it would behoove us all to take a step back and just think as much as we can take a step back, because this is already all happening. Having said that, to your question of like, how do we actually get there? I said this earlier, it's about creating space for the other. Like it's not going to happen. I'm saying this in the context again of just being an Israeli in the war we were just in. So hopefully it carries more weight. While there's of course place in this world still, unfortunately, for war, it's not going to happen if we can't see God's image in one another, right? If we can't create space for someone else, if we can't actually have a real conversation where we see each other, then I don't see how we could even talk about ideas of a house of prayer for all nations, right? So it's ultimately gonna have to be in policy and politics, which really means in leaders, and also means ultimately like in communities, and that really starts as I'm an Orthodox Israeli American Jew,
So
we're not gonna have that kind of clarity until like all of us. I mean, and I really think this is what the world is dealing with right now. Just to digress a little, I even see like the rise of let's say a Nick Fuentes as like a data point to that, which is like there's a lack of meaning in the world, and people want to be identified, and you even see this in ICE, right? People wanting to know who they are, and people want to know who the other is. And I think this is true also about Jews specifically. Like we need to say truthfully who we are. People of the world need to know who they really are themselves, and so we could actually have a real dialogue with each other. And then once that happens, perhaps we could actually build bridges. But we need to be interested into building bridges. And right now we're still in Babel, right? And that just leads to the tower falling apart.
Yeah, and may I?
In that understanding, though, Hezi, like, is it only incumbent on the Jews to basically be in that that unity, or is it the whole world? And are we getting closer or further away from that?
We're definitely getting closer. I mean, you could look at Steven Pinker's work, which I know like people like, he's not as enthusiastic as you want someone to be, but like where society has gone, we've obviously gone leaps and bounds as far as like, longevity of life and morality and how people are living. And like, we don't even realize how fortunate we are that I mean, it's used as like a classic trope about like, that the walking with the swastika, right, is protected under free speech, because like, we've gone a very, very long way as society, and there's obviously still so much more to go. But the answer is, and you're asking me, Jonathan, as far as like, so sort of relates to this, the Jewish mission. I believe the Jews have the responsibility of showcasing this so the other nations of the world can be blessed through this. And obviously every other nation has its own chosenness that he is supposed to show the world. There's the chosenness of the Americans, of the Africans. I'm saying the Caucasians, the Africans, the Asian. Everyone has their chosenness. Everyone has to shine brightly properly. So really, it's a global mission. Everyone at this point needs to be doing this. I would argue that through Christianity and through Islam, much of God's wisdom already, I would even say in some of the Eastern religions, has been promulgated throughout the world. So hence, it's much easier for us now to ask everyone to phase shift and demand more. But yes, do I think you're asking me about like all I could do is in my neighborhood, in my house, and of course in my country. So right now, and sorry, Jonathan, why it matters and why your question matters is because we could see the Jewish state, for all intents and purposes, right, is, and these are for pros or cons, depends how you're looking at it, is turning into a superpower in its region, right? That has ramifications to the whole world. If it's selling weapons, for example, to countries that are doing war crimes in it, that's a real problem, right? Like, how is that happening? Right now, I could, while at the same time, I could argue for certain acts of war. There's other things that obviously, if you are supposed to be representing God's people, then that's also a problem. So, this is a demand that, of course, does require, I would say, from the Jewish people to orient properly from the individual, household, neighborhood, community, nation itself. And I'll end on this note, which is, it's in Hebrew, it's the families of the earth will be blessed by you. We are supposed to revert back to the model of families. Even from a nation perspective, the ideal, the relationship is supposed to be familial, which again, I gave the example with the hostages. We want the familial bond that would then push a whole country to fight and protest to make sure that everyone comes home, including the hostages, right? Like Israel sent out a mission to get one body back. Right now, soldiers crying, this was healing for the whole country just to get this one guy back that no one even knew. But that is a familial bond that you're seeing manifest in
Yeah. Actually, I can't quite agree with this.
Chesney, can I ask you a question? Just a basic question. I just come as a humble inquirer. I have been trying. I'm familiar with Fuentes, like kind of stuff, and I have yet to get a clear answer. But maybe there is none. When you say, as I understand it, Zionism redefined Jewish as a nationality, like on the identification card in Israel, your nationality is Jewish, correct?
Not anymore.
Oh,
It used to be. Mine is. My son isn't.
what is your son's nationality?
Israeli.
Okay. So, but at a certain point, okay, so you're saying all right, so maybe there's been a clarification, but at a certain point under nationality, it would say Jewish, right?
Well, because it's tough. It's an ethnicity. It later on also takes on like elements of a religion as well. Even though there's religious elements to Judaism, it's first a national mode. I mean, it's taking out of the land of Egypt to be brought to the land of Canaan. That's the mission statement. Later on, almost as an aside, guess what? There's also these rules at Sinai as well. And that turns into something else. And that's also due to a flood, other issues, Egypt failing, because there's a whole sense that Egypt itself could have been a chosen nation, but like they had their own issues. But I would say the mode was always national. Later on, there's religious elements that are also get added onto that as well.
Okay, are you speaking? So I understand there's no like Pope in Judaism or among Jewish people, and it's not even clear whether it's political, whether it's
Political too.
Okay, but what I'm saying is, help me. But you're speaking from a certain perspective, or you're saying all, like this is a general understanding.
I'm speaking from a certain perspective, specifically with regards to, let's say, Judaism. I mean, Zionism, or let's say national Zionism, even though that itself is already a loaded term. So I would say that not all Jews, I would say, would be, let me take a step back. I would be still considered within the tent of Orthodox Judaism, even with these views. However, not all Orthodox Jews hold these views, and definitely not all secular Jews hold these views.
Right. Okay. So I guess what I'm saying is, it seems to me like historically there was a split when Zionism arose as to whether Zionism was sort of really blasphemous, which I think was the majority opinion of rabbis at the time, that without the Messiah, we cannot enter the Holy Land. I believe that's
Zionism,
true.
you're talking about?
Go ahead. What's that?
Political Zionism.
Well, Theodor Herzl's movement, which was largely a secular movement, I believe that most rabbis at the time have attested, and this I've learned from Jewish, I think, anti-Zionist Orthodox Jews on the internet. So that's all I have. I don't know anything.
There were a lot of Jews that were.
They saw it as a secular movement, sort of
correct.
Not a kind of secular messianism.
The move of individuals to Israel, always rah.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
The dream to return to Israel, or let's say the prayer for Zion, always everyone wants that. The move that Theodor Herzl did, right? The secular move of Zionism got a lot of pushback. Later on, throughout that process, it got there was an acceptance to it, seeing it through a religious framing at that point. And then later on, there's another movement of once the state of Israel now exists, that then sort of swayed some opinions, because something that some people were against, also because like it seems improbable, once it became actual, then that changed some opinions. But yes, originally there was pushback to that because the sense was that we don't know how to, we're not able to do that, and also religious elements to it, which is who are we to do this? Going as far as people saying that, there's a famous rabbi, Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, who said that, our job is to be, we're supposed to be Israel as individuals amongst the nations right now, like, the real land. And obviously the Reform movement went down that line, route as well. I think I understand what you're saying. My problem is that, or my question is, so I would say that the more pious Jews, from what I understand, but maybe it's just like the leaders, it seemed like to the extent to which you were religiously Jewish, you were opposed to this secular movement, which was mostly atheistic, which was kind of saying, we're going to do this thing that the nations are doing, right? Like following kind of nationalism from Europe. And we're going to do it. We're going to be like, kind of like, they never claimed there was a Messiah that was leading them, but they were kind of secularizing the Messiah to be a secular, anti-religious almost movement. And then I get that it kind of got blended in, but what I'm saying is, what I don't understand is, how does that get like made sense of? Because it seems like that would be a rift. Do you know what I mean? In the sense, you're basically redefining Jewishness in a way that almost has nothing to do with religion, almost favors being anti-religious, and following I don't know if we can use this term, the goyim's like way of thinking about nations and power. And I know there was also a repudiation of like the idea of the weak Jew who's pious and who abides by, like, it lives in harmony with the greater. It's the idea of the muscular Jew who acts like in a certain sense, the Ubermensch, right? Who is now going to exhibit secular power ruthlessly. And so that could seem anti-Jewish in a way, you know what I mean? And I understand. Those are all good points, and they're actually very, very good, very good questions. So, I wouldn't say, and we spoke about this actually at the beginning of the stream, like the more pious Jews, it's a hard claim. You have to, first of all, separate the European Jews from the North African Jews. The North African Jews are really not interacting with the Enlightenment the same way and modernity the same way.
Right,
So
right.
it's not that they're not interested in coming to Israel. The idea of making your own state is not even, it's not even on the menu as like something to discuss. So it's not like they're against Zionism. It's
Right.
just not like, okay. The European Jews, there's a split. There is, many Jews become secular.
Right.
Many Jews decide to, as a response to secularism and modernity, decide to now create many levels of fences and turn this version of what's the ultra-Orthodox Jews, or what you would call a quote-unquote pious Jew.
Mm-hmm.
They come down and say like, no. We're locking into this thing right now. And the job is right now to basically only learn the scripts basically all day, all night. That is it. And they are reclusing. They become recluses basically. And we're dealing with a lot of that in Israel as well. Now,
Wait, can you explain to me what you mean? You said the word scripts. What do you mean by that?
no, I'm saying they're holy scripts. Their focus becomes inward, basically. Their focus becomes, I'm not engaging with the outer world in that sense, as in I'm not moving forward.
Oh,
with
like what I'm
modernity.
calling the pious? You're talking about what I'm calling
Correct.
the pious?
They
Okay,
are now
sure.
locking up like a certain garb, the black suit, the black hat. There's a certain
Sort
look
of embracing the ghetto-ishness
correct
of it.
that is the model that gets kept basically.
Okay.
And we see that through these other movements, right? Communism, fascism, like all these with a lot of promises. It's devastation. It's the devil's work. Hell no. Then comes this assault. 1 second. Secular Jews are now telling me we're making a state called Israel in the land of Israel, but we're not Jewish. We're Hebrew, and this whole secular conversation. So not only are you coming to Israel, rather you are governing yourself with a king, and that king is not even God or like the Messiah. It's like a secular thing on top. So this is horrible for
openly
example,
secular, right? Like not
correct.
even pretending to be
openly secular.
pious.
And this is also like for someone like Jacob, the owner of this channel. You know, this is horrible, right? This is horrible. Now I say like we're very close because both of us understand the importance of the nationality and the political element of it. He would say you're too soon. And that's why anything that's not a divine version of that is a complete no and an abomination.
You're too what? Soon?
When I'm saying, he's saying you're too soon, as in, yes, there should be like when Messiah comes, he'll rule as king,
okay,
and then we'll have a rule. But until then,
you're jumping the
anything
gun,
else,
kind of.
Correct, is nothing.
Okay.
Now,
yeah.
In my perspective and other perspectives that were at that time also considered pious Jews, they saw this, and there's a term in Judaism called there's the Davidic Messiah and there's the Josephite Messiah. These are archetypes as well. These could also be seen multi-level as actual individuals, archetypes, movements, ideas. There's different levels of interpretation of these ideas.
Yeah.
Either way, the archetype of Joseph, as in wearing the garb of Egypt and being very successful for a protector of the Jews and for the world during his time, right? That is a model of messianism. Well, not messianism, a Messiah that is coming through secular tools or through secular movement, as in it's not one that is represented by quote unquote a Jew or by what would classically be seen as Jewish symbols, but it's wearing other symbols. So, or when we speak about Messiah coming in on a donkey in Hebrew, the word donkey means chamor, which also means material, as in someone riding the material wave, so to speak. And the interpretation is that, and I'm taking one step back, our sages have already interpreted that when we come to the land, God says, and when you look to the nations around you and you see they have a king, you could give yourself a king. And we've interpreted that as you don't live in a vacuum. You are Jews that are living in a real world where there's other nations. While you may be chosen for something, right? It's not necessarily to create the democratic system, right? There's Socrates, there's others ideas out there that they themselves, there's other prophets out there as well. There's other stories going on. When you come to the land, you will see what's around you, see what the other kids are playing in the field. And whatever the best system is, it could be monarchy, it could be democracy. you are allowed to adapt a tool like that, just like I'm not telling the Jew to invent a new weapon instead of the sword. If swords work well, use them. If a plow works well, we use it. So if democracy works well, so Israel then, and I would say this also happens in the Zionistic movement, there are different strands of Zionism at some point.
Of course,
some of them saying we are not so secular anymore. Even Theodor Herzl himself, while starting much more secular, eventually, and in his own words, explains that really the return to Israel is also a return to Judaism in a certain sense. We could discuss what that Judaism looks like. Nevertheless, I see the establishment of the state of Israel specifically through the only way it could have happened, it would never happen through rabbis. And this is sort of part of the miraculous element of it. The rabbis are not built to now gather together the political power, the tenacity needing to do that, the moves needing to do that, that kind of conversation, the political wit to do that is not the classic exile Jewish mode. So it has to happen that way.
Can I just bounce something back? Because I think I vaguely, you're much more familiar, you're living it. But in some sense, the secularism, let's say, of nationalism, which saw it like in Germany was like the most extreme version, was almost religious, right? And it's true that basically, let's say I'm Catholic, but like the Catholic response was this is a sort of repudiation of the Christian piety which came before it, right? But they in some sense felt like in a certain sense they were secular in the sense of being anti-Christian, whether overtly or covertly, but it was definitely like there's definitely, you can't be someone who holds the philosophy of like extreme ethnic nationalism and be a Christian. They were incompatible, and there were many Catholics who were killed because they said that out loud. There was also some compromises made, but isn't it what I don't understand, what I'm trying to figure out is this rift that you have with Zionism, although I know there's different flavors, I don't see how it isn't a greater rift than between Jews who followed Jesus as the Messiah and Jews who did not follow Jesus as the Messiah, because it's almost deeper in the sense of a completely different understanding, a complete, it's one or the other, right? Like it was experienced as like radically different visions. So you're waiting 2,000 years for a Messiah, and then you go, actually, forget it. We're just going to do it ourselves. Like I can see how people who've been waiting 2,000 years would say, well, wait a second. Like, no, this is in God's hands, not our hands. Right. And for us to just jump the gun and, just be very pragmatic, also to pick up on what the Europeans are doing is not really us, right? It's just sort of going with it's idolatrous in the sense of acting like the nations around you, right?
If it stays like that. So you're right that ultimately the model of Joseph fails and Moses leaves Egypt and he covers the Egyptian of sand, right? Like I'm saying, that is also symbolic of saying we're not going to, redemption won't come through this, or definitely won't come through this alone. Judaism, or in my eyes, and I'm not looking to become a theocracy in that sense, but we are a Jewish state fundamentally that chooses to participate in a democratic process. So I'm saying, but it's not the other way around. It's not that we're a democracy that happens to be Jewish. And we're not like Switzerland. We're not like every other country, which, by the way, and why Nick Fuentes is correct when he says, Ben Shapiro is not America first. Correct. Ben Shapiro and any Jew, and definitely any Orthodox Jew, cannot be America first. And I love America. I think the founding fathers were divinely inspired. I think it's amazing that it exists. I want more power to America. I understand that that's not. I just heard this long podcast with Nick Fuentes, which had obviously insane anti-Semitism in it, but also something that was very true and very interesting when I was hearing him speak as well. But there's that tension, which is yes. So I think the world is seeing, and definitely in Israel we're seeing this. We ourselves are trying to figure out who we are and what that story and that tension obviously felt, right? Because
Yeah.
like we're not looking to be like everyone else. Having said that, we realize that we're playing with everyone else, and more than that, our job is to be a light onto everyone else, which doesn't mean you all have to be like us. Very much not that. And only by being that light can we illuminate the nations of the world to then illuminate back at us. We require your blessing. We require to do this together. But
I guess my question is like what you mean by we, because like I think a good analogy is Catholicism. We are obviously in some ways rooted in Judaism. So like, for example, so Jews will say to be a Jew is different than being a Catholic. I'm not sure really why that is, because I think they're more similar than people understand. But I don't know why Jews say, and I don't even know. So to me, it would be like you're either a Jew or a Zionist, not
all Jews. No, 1 second.
not like Zionism is such a break that either you redefine Jews, all Zionists as Jews, and then people who are anti-Zionist are not Jews or are in some sense like we would say heretics, right? So like I don't think you have these terms.
Zionism. Again,
Judaism is a nationality.
Zionism is a problem again. Is like
that doesn't make much sense, Andrew.
No, not the current state of Israel. Zionism as the promise of again, it's a trifecta of people, God, and land. The only place God, the divine, needs to in our tradition, in our theology, manifests through us, through the land. Like I need a place to do that manifestation, and that place happens on a land. And that's why when I say
you don't
Zionism,
need it, right? Because you had the captivity, you remain Jews in captivity.
But that's not, as our sages tell us. Once
but it's like maybe it's like the resurrection where we say, without your body you have a soul, but only when you're together will you be one.
Precise. We can't. We are.
But you don't need it. You don't need it. It won't destroy you as a people to be in captivity.
Just we're all
right.
We are all waiting to get. We
yearn for it. We desire it. It would be.
We want to get to this 8th day. We're not going to like when we're in exile for 2,000 years, and this is also a tension coming to Israel right now, and a tension that Jonathan and I were talking about. For 2,000 years, we were practicing a dry run of Judaism in diaspora without a land, right? So this is like a shadow of what Judaism used to be. Plus, we're basically 2.5 tribes left of the 12 tribes. You're talking about like a nothing of a nothing, pogroms, all the other stuff going on. Now, when we've come back, so there's a religious 2,000-year exoskeleton. On top of that, there's a thinner veneer of secularism and modernity on top of that. Okay?
Yeah.
And now we come back to this land,
and European nationalism. I guess you included that with secularism.
But 1948 now, now you're like in this Bible story. You're like, 1 second, I'm literally back to Hebron and this land and that land, and there's the Temple Mount. So now you have like this people that are slowly trying to remove this exoskeleton, but doing that and keep on falling. Second, also trying to run a country and be a superpower while you have no tradition of politics and actually running the government, right? You have 2,000 years of just arguing, talking, and doing and surviving, but not actually not wielding serious power. You're dealing
on
with
a national level,
Not even that. You get smacked in the face with the beautiful God irony, which is, guess what? And you have a people in your land, and those people are from Ishmael, and you have to now deal with all these people that are also on your land. So that to me is like one of our biggest trials, which is like this is like it almost couldn't be any different. That this is how it played out in a certain sense.
To me, you almost would you would have a level of trauma trying to make sense of this that would lead you to like schizophrenia being the norm. And I do believe there's an argument that like there's a kind of psychosis that has taken the place of rationality. But I'm very interested in what Andrew has to say. He seems to think it's super easy just to say Judaism is a nationality. I really don't get how that would be true.
Well,
like,
so
without any.
yeah. So the way I've heard it explained to me is the reason it's like a nationality is this. If you're born in America, you're an American no matter what your beliefs are, and if you move to Italy, you'll still be considered by the natives of Italy to be an American. But you can still immigrate to America, and so if you accept the values of America. And so similarly with Judaism, if you're born into Judaism, you'll be a Jew no matter what if you're born to a Jewish mother. But you can also join the Jewish nation by converting if you accept the values of Judaism.
Well, hold on one second. If a baby is born in America, moves to Italy, and becomes a citizen of Italy, as soon as they're a citizen of Italy, that is their nationality. They might be seen, depending on how long they're in America, as being American in some way. But nationality would just be like kind of citizenship. I think that's all that means.
But the commandments were given to a people, not to an individual. It's a people. It's not
Sure.
it's not a religion. It's about the people themselves have this, and the people have to be in a certain place, and all these commandments
Right.
have to do with the land. All its socialist elements all have to do with the land. The Jubilee is related to the land. The tithing is related to the land. That's where you have to practice out all these things. So all these commandments that we have been doing right now, all these Jews are not participating in any of them.
Wait a second. So are you saying that, like, during the captivity, like, we have records of this in what we would call the Old Testament, maybe Hebrew scriptures would be a good term. I understand there was a kind of longing to go back to the land, but it was possible to be a good Jew in captivity, correct?
An
Faithful-
incomplete Jew.
But you were, in a sense, like, you would be seen as like good with God.
Yeah,
But
good
you
with
would
God.
yearn for.
Yeah, I mean, good with God in the sense of, like, obviously trying constantly to do better and repent. But your mission is to be a priestly class and bring blessing to the world. You could only do that in your homeland. The reason you're not in the homeland is because you've strayed from God's path. You're not oriented properly.
Right.
All those reasons why you kicked out.
Yeah.
You want to come back because that's the place where you get to practice these things.
No, I get it. I do get the yearning. I'm just saying, when you say it's impossible without it, I would say, like, well, okay.
It's not
it's kind
full.
of an incomplete or but I would say wouldn't that still be clearly in the Hebrew scriptures? There's a religion which has priests and a priesthood and a temple that has not been restored. I don't think at all. I don't think there are any Jewish priests today.
No,
Yeah.
there's
So
no-
if I may
There's
pose
a
a
priest-
question,
There is that right? There are priests.
well, there's
there's a
Kohanim.
priest there's a priestly class. I happen to be from the tribe of Levite, for example. So, like, and there's some rituals that we still do, like during prayer. But you are correct that post the destruction of the temple, I mean, that's where I mean, this is a series that we're doing over here on prayer, which is that's when institutionalized prayer gets set up, right? Because there is no longer that conversation at the temple, right? Where
Right.
prophecy leaves. We become, I mean, not abandoned, but obviously the retraction from God becomes even more severe. There's a harsher retraction, and we are now up until 1948, I believe we've been in this exile period.
Right. Okay. So, but you have no functioning ritual religion without the temple being restored. Like, in
no,
a sense,
we have-
Catholics have had, like, priests can't function in like Ireland. You know, when the English were there, they'd be shot. But, like, we don't have presuppose that the Vatican has to be functioning for, like, a priest.
No,
right? But with Judaism, it's much more closely tied to the actual.
Yeah,
temple.
but we have prayers 3 times a day. In the states, the priests don't bless in the states or outside of Israel. The priests bless the congregation only on the Sabbath. In Israel, the priests bless the congregation every prayer service. The priests congregate. I still wash their hands, and they make a certain blessing. There's all the high holidays, obviously. There's blessings, there's customs, there's the Passover Seder that we still say. So all those things, and as much as possible, we maintain as much as possible to what was in the temple. And there are elements where we can't, where you then learn about what was being done at the temple, right? And basically, exile is the tension between our glorious past and our hopeful future.
Right.
That is where we're in during that period.
But you know, like so Christians, if you look at Christians as like a branch of Jews, which I think clearly early on they said, it's very clear in the New Testament, the temple becomes the body of Christ, and therefore we have a kind of, not even just a substitution, but like a better option, or whatever you want to say, right? A fulfillment. So we leave the temple behind, and it becomes something which we have churches, but we don't have any connection to the temple on the level that it's like the I don't know what to say, like the power plant for the ritual. It's not necessary.
I'll respond to that.
This has been great. I have to go. Always good talking to y'all.
Later, dude. Stay healthy. I hope your parents are doing well as well. So already in the Bible, when it says, "Build me a tabernacle, and so I could dwell amongst them." It's a tabernacle in singular, but amongst them in plural. And our sages already have said then, which is really build me a tabernacle in your heart, right? Which is like ultimately, we have to even the Holy of Holies that has the ark, right? That has cherubs on top of it. Clearly, there's a cultural appropriation over there that's happening, right? God is aware of the context of the cherubs in the other context of the cultures in the region. So we're using that as a certain tool. Now, do I think without a temple, like one cannot connect to God? No, we obviously know that today, that I'm still for the last 2,000 years I've been doing it. And when it's called a house of prayer for all the nations in the future, what my hope is that correct. And there is a discussion about this. Is the ritual sacrifice still going to be necessary? Are things going to be like they were then? I would assume not. I don't spend too much time thinking about it because it doesn't really matter at this point. However, I'm very much okay with the idea that as long as humans phase shift morally and properly, that when we get to the point where, redemption comes and we don't need a temple and it's something else that we call a temple, but it's some other symbol, fantastic. Like I don't.
Okay, all right, but why do you say the land needs to be taken literally, but the temple, which I think in traditional Jewish piety is even more sort of like the place, like really super important, and the Wailing Wall, the endless sort of like sorrow at losing the temple, you go, well, it could just be a spiritual thing.
Because
like,
I'm not
like very casual.
Because
it's older. The promises of the land are older, precede the temple. Like the temple, it's not even clear that there necessarily will be a temple when God makes a promise to Abraham and the Israelites are in the land, because it doesn't get built until Solomon. So it's like King David is the Jewish king that never had a temple. He's just
but isn't it the tabernacle isn't the tabernacle like a tent that goes with you? This goes all the way back to Moses, right? Like there is a sort of dwelling place, right?
Before
proto temple, right?
Yeah, but it's like at a certain point then it settles down. I mean, there's like, well, let's see how would we have this discussion if like the Vatican City gets blown up? Then it's like, where is the Catholic Church? Does it still exist? Is that still an
super easy?
thing?
It's super easy for us.
Well, I think so. I think so. But it's not. But it's not also like. But even
the papacy, the papacy has been in other places than the Vatican. No real problem. The person of the bishop carries the role, not the place.
But it's still an important part of like, okay, so what makes what distinguishes a Catholic from an Orthodox or something like that? Is still going to be tied to some of that history. I mean,
yeah, I agree.
And I mean, you know, it's like, hey, was there? If Atlantis was a real place and there was survivors, they are just part of whatever. You know, they just got blended in with everybody else. But I mean, that was even the distinction from the Roman Empire onwards, because it wasn't a religion. Judaism isn't like thought of as a religion until like the 1800s or whatever it is.
I don't think that's true.
Well, but it was the people that are.
Well, let me ask you this.
The distinction is the people that come from that place, and even you can say like, you know, even when you have exile, you have two exiles. You know, if Jews that went exiled into Assyria, they lost their identity, but even in exile in Babylon, it's connected as you are people that came from that other place to here. So I mean, a place is always a part of a person's identity.
I don't think. But Michael, the argument that Ben is saying over here, let's say, forget the land, but you're right. The focus on the temple, right? The temple. Why? How am I okay saying like, forget that? First of all, it's already downgraded from a temple to a house of prayer later on in the prophets. Second of all, the prophets also speak in language of, do you think I need your sacrifices, right? Ultimately, these are all tools. Now, we still have the language of the last of the prophets, right? So the only thing I could be looking through is the language of the prophets, and then through hopefully a real tradition, even if it's a oral tradition, that then let's get it written down about like what are the rules, how to even interpret those things. So those are my tools. And
are you not including philosophy like in a basic way?
Of course.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Of course. I mean, Maimonides definitely goes the route of Aristotelian philosophy until that sort of gets debunked later on. There's Neoplatonism, which makes its way through, let's say, Kabbalah, which it's not really mysticism, but for all intents and purposes, we'll say mysticism right now.
Do you know there's a guy on the internet who's a direct lineal descendant of Maimonides?
It's very cool.
And he's called Horror Maxer. He's like kind of a sleazy guy in Las Vegas, but his last name is Maimon, and he claims direct lineal descendant. It's just an interesting factoid. I don't
know if his great grandfather is so proud, but hopefully he's well. So when I think about the temple again, I think now we're using the idea of a centralized place, right? That assuming us humans still need, right? We need a point of orientation, and that point of orientation is a place where we could imagine, this is how we could, because ultimately, right, God, hence there needs to be a retraction. We can't ultimately really see God. So whatever the experience is needs to be contained in some specific point, and that point is what we call the temple. So for all intents and purposes, that's what I'm longing for. That is...
You're saying all humans need that, or like the Jewish tradition needs that?
All humans need that.
Because Catholics don't need it. Like, we spiritualize it, right? So we would say,
as the
Zion is heaven, right? So we would say...
I was saying, so Jews later on, and I'm sure there's a lot of... You could see how this would get similar to the ideas in Christianity, but movements of Hasidism, Hasidut, definitely start talking about the righteous man, that he himself is basically embodying God in a certain sense.
Right.
And so you could see how that starts getting like, Judaism needs to be careful about that kind of terminology. But yes, we ourselves are those vessels for God, and that's why like I don't need necessarily a real temple. Any conversation though at that time when the prophets are speaking about that, there won't be any more war, and the sheep will lie with the so there's a point of orientation where everyone comes together. What that looks like, I don't know what that looks like. I don't need to die on the hill that it needs to be the height that Ezekiel described in his vision, or it needs to be there.
But you do say like that the land has to be like literally that land, and I'm just saying like that wasn't understood to be the thing prior to the Zionist movement.
No, that was always the conversation.
I know there was a yearning for the land, but this idea of like it's okay to do it in a kind of secular way was not part of the thing before Herzl. And so it's kind of an innovation, which is fine. I'm not saying that. But I want to pick up on what Michael said. See if you could listen to this. I know this could seem contentious, but Michael said that Judaism was never seen as a religion. Okay, but I think that Chizzy, you would say that Jesus was in some sense seen as a Jewish rabbi, and of course you might say he was a radical rabbi. Okay, whatever. But when he said like, you claim to
No,
be
that's
children
just
of
to say that-
Abraham. Well, let's do it real
Okay.
quick. You claim to be children of Abraham. God could make children of Abraham out of the rocks here. Those are true children of Abraham who are, have the faith of Abraham, not, it's, in other words, not by blood. So at least that opinion was there, that there's a kind of true Israel, which has to do with the heart, not, so it was not seen in a certain sense as, you're not a child of Abraham. You know what I'm saying? He spiritualized it, right? He says it's not blood, it's the faith. So that was clearly there. And so it's saying like, I think there was an understand that's a religious point of view, not a
Judaism.
Well, that's where you get into the thing, because if you go back first century, like Roman Empire, you have like the thing that keeps the empire going is the cult of the emperor worship. It's saying, look, we have a god. His name is Caesar Augustus. Everybody, and even though most of the people are like, yeah, he's not really a god.
Right.
What do? They do their little pinch of incense and they make the offering, because that's
Right.
what keeps everybody together. That's what keeps everything going. So
yeah.
And that's just the thing of religion and nation. It's all with that emergence of nationalism and the idea that even there was some sort of a plurality, that you first had Judaism as like a distinctive religion.
Well,
So
wait a second.
obviously
The
always
Romans were not a
influenced.
nation; they were an empire. They understood that there were
but
foreign
but
peoples.
all the nations had their own gods too, and even your own
Yeah.
cities and everything. So you couldn't separate religion from life the way that we do. Like, just saying the way that we think of like religion as your private spiritual beliefs. Like, it was tied into the economy. It was tied into the civil government. It was part of the it's when you have a war, it's gods fighting against each other. Like, everything is religious in some
Correct.
sense,
Which I think that's still true today. We just have different religions, and I think that I think when you say national, I understand like that it's natus, where you're born, is the origin of it. But I do believe that 19th century nationalism was a new thing.
Sure.
The idea of it being all like a kind of religio about like a certain people defined, it had to do with unifying disparate peoples. Like, the idea of a German people is ludicrous. There is no real coherence.
But this is also due to reality, right? Well, let me 1 second. Two things. One, what you said about Abraham, I think Jews, you are very correct, which is everyone is the son of Abraham, right? Jews followed, and that's why.
I mean, Jews.
No, I would say the
Abraham's
world.
the father of all humanity.
With the Noahides, correct? Everyone, the nations of the world will be blessed through Abraham. Those are all the children of Abraham. Jews are specifically have the covenant, or will use the Sharia of Moses, which has its 613 laws. That is specifically for them. That doesn't mean that all the rest of the nations don't need to make their way to the Father, aren't blessed, and can't be saved and live an amazing, good life. That's number one. It's very important that's what also Judaism sees for everyone. Secondly, Judaism also has to understand where the foreigner is living in his land as well. And we're not here to tell the foreigner now if you're living in Israel, you must be a Jew right now. You don't have to be a Jew. You just have to accept, like you just said.
Wait a second. You're talking about in the state of Israel?
In the state of Israel, and in the eventual, the Israel I'm looking forward to, okay, let's say the way I understand religious Judaism, or the way I understand halakha, the Jewish law, specifically talks about how built into our system we have the foreigner. We have to take care of the foreigner. That's thing that's constantly addressed in the Bible.
I just said, because my perspective is different. So when you're saying foreigner, I'm not sure. Are you talking about a Norwegian person in Norway? You know what I mean? Like, but you're saying in the Jewish state of Israel, someone who is of another nation doesn't lose his nationality. Is that what you're saying? Something like that?
Correct. And maybe even of even another potentially religion or flavor of religion. My stipulation would be the need to understand that it's coming from Abraham. So like I'm saying, in that sense, my relationship with Christians or some Christians, as far as I'm concerned, they're already categorized religiously in my operating system as Noahides, right? They're already saved. There's no, like, I don't need them. I might quibble with certain theology elements, but I need nothing from them. Like, live a good life, go to church, take care of your kid. Like, you won the game of life. Like, keep it up. We're all going to have.
But what I'm saying is, I think I get what you're saying. Noah is all of mankind because at the time of Noah, everyone else was wiped out. Abraham is later, but encompasses, is not the same as everyone.
Everyone.
Right?
Well, but that is
Abraham
the
was not the
Christian
father of all mankind.
Correct.
But
Right?
that is the Christian position, because it's the Abraham's believed God and it was credited as righteousness. So those who approach God through faith are the sons of Abraham. So
Right.
it doesn't mean that those who are directly descended through Abraham are not. But
we could also say that about
those,
Noah.
Yeah,
he had faith in God as well, right? So we don't see it as like which family within the subfamily, but clearly the Israelites are the sons of Jacob, right? And that the 12 tribes.
But that
and then the Jews are actually only what 2.5 of those tribes, or
well, I'm saying Jews predominantly are from Judah, right? I'm saying you have the split within Judah and the rest of the tribes, correct? Now,
why do you say 2.5? Because wasn't it Levi too, or
correct? Levi, there's some Benjamin,
and then a half of Ephraim or something.
Now we have Dan. Some of the Manasseh tribes have identified themselves, whatever that means. But you know, the idea that that even the name Israel is only our national name. There's Jacob, which is our religious identity. There's Israel, which is our national identity. And there's actually Jeshurun, which is our universal identity. This is the identity that I believe Israel sort of needs to move into in a certain sense, which is it has a universal message. It's not just a national message. The idea of the nationality, though, is because the reality is that there are many nations. Again, God, in a certain sense, is playing with the rules, which is it doesn't help me right now if I have something called gobbledygook and everyone else will learn from it. I need them, the example of the nation. That's why there's a land connected to it, because the Egyptians have the land and the Norwegians have a land. Everyone has a land. So the people of Israel are there to exemplify what that connection looks like: land, people, God.
Well, I think you can have a nationality that doesn't have a land. Like, isn't this like you have these, like the Armenians before they had Armenia? Anyway, I know it's complicated, but like, what are those people in Iraq? The Kurds. They don't have a nation per se, but they would say they're a nation, right?
Yeah. It's always like, because you're excluded by the exiled, the body that you're in. If they're not, either you get forced to assimilate, or the distinction is you're allowed to keep your distinction, or your distinction is forcibly, kept. Like, but it's still like there's going to be some root there where that probably is connected to land or whatever, or familial ties.
What I find interesting, because I know that in Israel, which is not where you are, right, Jesse? Or you are? I'm in Israel. I thought you said you were American.
I have an American citizenship though.
Oh, you're dual. Okay. All right. So there are I don't know if they're ultra Orthodox, but there are communities that are thoroughly anti-Zionist who usually claim to be devout, pious. I think they would say they're the inheritors of the pre-Zionist kind of piety.
Right. They're nuts.
I think there's a certain coherence, but if you want to say they're nuts.
I would agree with you that specific group, which is like, they're called, there's actually a few. There's one called Neturei Karta, which are actually crazy. They're like pro-Iran. It's very weird. Then there's a group called Satmar, which I'm they're against Zionism, and that's why they're against the national, the state of Israel. I do have issues with them. However, they at least have a coherent methodology that goes, backed with some sources. Now, I have arguments against some of those sources and how much weight some of those sources carry. Nevertheless, when arguing with someone from that group, and let's say Jacob, it would affiliate with that group in some sense. There's some meat over there that he could lean on that I could discuss.
I guess what I'm saying to some degree, Chizzy, because I'm Catholic, right? So we have a fairly clear, unlike Muslims, unlike Jews, unlike Buddhists, we have a fairly clear like sort of governance, right? So it's at a certain point when it's stretched, the idea of like what is Christian, we can make a clear delineation and then we say like that's not. And of course they still claim to be. But at a certain point, the definition of Jew, if it includes, even I find it like remarkable in Israel, these people are not like kind of like, no, you're welcome to do this within the Zionist state. But it must feel like you're stretching to say there's a we still here when it's absolutely contrary, right? So you have people who are saying, I look forward to the destruction of the Zionist state, even by violence. Okay, living with people who are saying like to be a Jew is to be in the nation. So that must be really, I'm just saying psychologically, it must be like really hard to then say like, okay, we're part of a group.
I'll respond to that, and then I want Jonathan to share some thoughts, which is, first off, you're right that let's say that group that I just said, like Sadmer, they see me as Jewish, right? They don't see me as, let's say, the people of Israel that I'm talking about. They'd be like, that chapter has not come yet. Like we might be in the same book as in like you are categorically a Jew as far as we're concerned, like through the halachic, the Jewish law understanding.
Yeah.
Right? However, you are not the nation of Israel. The current state of Israel is just Jews living in a place playing make-believe. Okay?
Right,
and
right,
you're right. So when I say we, they would be like, don't include me in that we.
And they would see it as sort of a blasphemous, no, I'm not saying blasphemous, but
blasphemous.
A mockery of messianism, true messianism.
Correct.
Okay, sure.
I would say they have lost the thread, right? I would say like they've gone off the reservation. And while I see them as Jews, when I say we, my we is saying because I'm hopeful that they open up their eyes and they don't miss the boat. That's.
But you understand that there is a logic to what they're saying because they're continuing the logic of most Jewish people prior to Zionism.
Correct.
Right?
They're just since 1948, the onus is on them then, and this is what we're starting the conversation, which is the things you've been seeing and let's say the data points you've been seeing that also correlate to sources and like you now, if you're anti this, have to answer like why are there ingathering of the tribes? Why are all these Jews coming back? How did we best all the things? Why is the land giving fruit? Why are all these things happening? And it comes all the way to, for example, when Iran shoots an insane amount of missiles and it seemingly miraculous, the way I was explaining it before, I would come and say, we should sing praise. Now, there's a big question there because someone would ask, okay, if you're anti-Zionist, you come and say, no way are you singing praise. If you're somewhere in the middle, you'd say you sing praise, but you don't include the full blessing as you don't mention God's name, because that would be a blasphemy already if you don't know that God himself already has done this. I would go and say like, no, the invitation for me right now is God is saying, step up. Like if you want this, come and meet me halfway. It's not going to be that literally a temple falls in the sky and everyone just says, oh, the Jews were right. Like we have to do a much better job showing the world that if we claim who we are, then be miraculous.
But then wouldn't you have to say that the folks in the 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th century who developed this piety, which was, live peaceably among the nations, we're awaiting the Messiah, like they prayed, and they didn't mean like, let's await, nationalistic sort of, they didn't have that in mind.
They had nothing in mind. That's the point. The point is sometimes it requires, and that's why I go back to the Josephite Messiah. Sometimes it requires someone from the outside with a secular garb being like, if you guys sit here and continue having your 17-hour Talmudic discussions, it will never happen. The window is the 19th century when people are talking about nation states. The window is so
no, I get the logic, but I'm saying in a certain sense, those folks, you would have to, I'm not saying you have to condemn them or anything like that, but you'd have to say, in a sense, they were making things worse because, like you're saying, they were just sort of, what they were calling piety was actually just wasting time with endless discussions.
Stagnation.
They should have got with it and been making plans to, right? So what I'm saying is Catholics have the same problem. Some say like the old ways are good and the new ways are wrong. Some say, but we don't have this radical redefinition 100 years ago. I don't think anyone could argue that we've had this radical redefinition as a nation state and sort of in a way that would have to bifurcate the body in a fundamental way. Like if the Vatican said today, Catholicism is a nationality, would be like, wow, what?
It only seems radical because the focus went from national to religious and specifically inwards for 2,000 years. And that's my point about the exoskeleton, which is like, it's not that I'm saying, I'm just going back to the original version. There's the resistance is not that there was an original version that hopefully we could go back to. It's like, we're not ready yet. And my question to those people is, okay, no problem. Can you articulate for me what it would look like? And my answer to them is like, as far as you're concerned, the bar is literally the hand of God. Like it would need to be, which I'm saying already within our text, like you're asking for miracles greater than Sinai in a certain sense, because even if that happens, you're going to be like, well, what was his accent? How long did he speak for? Like, it's just like, there's no, like, so then I'm looking at it like, okay, I have things that would seem miraculous as far as the world sees it, and it's in the land of Israel, and it's all these things stacking up. Then I believe at that point, my test is sort of like in the Song of Songs, right? My beloved is knocking on the door. And I always tell Jacob, like, the beloved, the best looking girl in town is calling me out for a date. You are risking being late. I will risk being early. I can't risk being late again to this date.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would just say, maybe you use I don't think shooting down missiles is miraculous in the sense of a suspension of the laws of nature. You're just saying improbable.
Yeah, but I'm saying
to the point of like maybe astronomical odds, but I don't think you would say it's a miracle. Literally, that's a stretch.
Well,
what else is a miracle?
I was going to say, in Judaism, a miracle doesn't necessarily mean.
Maybe it's a different definition. Yeah.
Right. I could take a position which is a rationalist position and say like there is nothing that's coming out. I can't surpass nature. I could go to the pure pragmatist attitude, which is like nature is what I'm observing constantly, but a miracle is possible. We never really experienced a miracle. I would argue that, and this is also what we say about a lot of these miracles were made between the 6th and the 7th day. I don't necessarily see them as necessarily something that is beyond nature.
That would be the difference. I completely understand if it's different. I'm just saying we would say it's beyond nature, like impossible to account for by nature. Just be a different standard, same word.
I would say the timing is what's miraculous. But again, you were saying improbable. I'm saying what to me points about the miracle, and this we see particularly in the story of Hanukkah. In the story of Hanukkah, the rabbis instituted a blessing, which is when we light the candles, we say as God commanded us. And the question is automatically like, but God never commanded us to do this. God wasn't talking to us at that point.
Mm-hmm.
It was the courage, which was then radical, of the rabbis to decide at that time, what we just witnessed, and I'm putting aside the miracle of the oil. You could question if that actually happened.
Yeah, that sounds like a miracle to me.
Correct. But I'm saying the winning of the battle, the idea that we have witnessed this, we are considering this a miracle. And because of that, we are willing to say that God is signing off on this. No one said that. They made the decision, And
Yeah.
that's what all of us Jews do
No,
today.
I get you that you can read I would call it a sign, a clear sign, something that's just highly improbable, seems to have all the whatever. Anyways, I don't mean to overtake your time. I really thank you for your time.
Sure.
I hope I have been. I don't think you sensed in me some sort of insidious. I'm just genuinely curious, and I'd love to follow up because I think a lot of times we understand the word Jew to mean something. I actually don't even know if Jews understand what it means.
Did you find this informative?
It is, but I find it and this may be because I'm a Catholic and we have more of these clear distinctions, and we have I find it like that what you're saying as a Jew is almost like you'd almost have to be schizophrenic to believe that all of these people really have anything in common.
I will leave you with then, if you're leaving, what the Talmud says in Tractate Megillah, page 13. It says, he who denies idol worship is a Jew.
Okay, interesting. I'll meditate on that. Thank you, Chizzy. Thank you, guys.
You got it. I'm just seeing how much Claire. He's upset at me, but Jonathan, I know that took a turn. I hope that was okay.
Yeah. I actually had a question for you, Hezi, but I think you got to go.
Well, I want to have Jonathan to say some things.
You're muted.
You're muted.
Can you hear me now?
I hear you now.
Good. Well, I mean, I thought that was an interesting conversation, so I was mostly just kind of listening. I think we probably have another conversation we could get into about maybe more specifics around technology, AI, how that manifests, and maybe less about the insularity of the certain Jewish groups, because I think it's probably like we talked about, inevitable that there will have to be a reckoning, and maybe they sort of just get left behind as communities. But maybe they'll catch up quickly. I think there was one specific like if you went back in time and you introduced the iPhone, and assuming internet and all those things could somehow exist or like be transported with you and have that thread back into the present, right? But you introduced this technology to someone who had never seen it before, their minds would be blown, but like within a week or so they'd be on TikTok, right? So like it's never too late, because the paradigms are shifting so fast right now. I believe that anytime those communities that maybe have been reticent or slow, they will be able to come right in without any loss of fidelity. That's my take. It won't take long for the paradigm shift to happen, and it will just catch up with the current state, which we are constantly having to reinvent and relearn anyway.
Yes, but and this is something that Jacob and I have spoken about, and I can understand how someone disagrees with this, but the operating system of Judaism is relevant for humans. And for the last 5,000 plus years, humans, right, are let's say more or less the same. I would argue that the technology that we are being introduced to right now, and the also from the bioengineering perspective or the gene editing perspective, you are getting to a place where you are potentially changing how humanity interacts in a significant way, where it's not enough for you to adapt, obviously. Like if you want to remain Jewish, right, then your Jewish operating system needs to be able to adapt as well to that, because it's now, it's a map and territory sort of issue over here, but it's not going to map on anymore to these types of humans. And that is obviously like a very big fear of mine. And you could say that, even if you want to say that that's 50 years from now, that is, I think, too soon. That's too close for comfort for, let's say, a divine operating system, or one that claims that it's a divine operating system, if he wants to still be relevant and be contending in these things, whether it's AI rabbis or how Jewish halacha is working on how it relates to Jews and how they relate to the world around them. So it's not only by hook or by crook people are going to have to integrate with this. It's not only are you going to have to integrate with it, but you have to be doing two things at the same time, right? I can't just allow myself to get thrown into it. I need to integrate with it properly if I'm an observant person. Secondly, part of my operating system is constantly telling me that I need to orient this technology, but really any tool in my life, I need to orient it through to holy means, right? So as this new thing that is developing as I'm going along, right? Like I need to be talking with it and try to orient it properly. How am I oriented properly if I'm not engaging fully with it? And how am I fully engaging with it if I'm not protected by a system that allows me to engage with it properly, right? So like before I let you go to learn secular studies, I have to first arm you with, let's say, comes Maimonides and writes the Guide for the Perplexed, right? I'm going to arm you with this, so now you could tackle that. But if I want to now deal with AI or deal with technology that's changing my environments and changing how I'm viewing the world, then there's multiple things I need to be doing here at the same time. And that's where like, it's less about catching up. It's more about, are the people in charge, so to speak, of the operating system, are they updating it or at the very least saying, hey, we're going to give you now more jailbreaks, but that's not a bug, that's a feature, right? Like as in you're going to have more flexibility because now we're like sort of like in a different time, and I need to allow you to be able to not be ossified, allow you to be able to move around with this. I hope this analogy like makes sense.
It does. If I understand what you're saying, I mean, the risk is there are going to be communities who are not equipped with maybe the foundational material that builds on each other for future understanding of how to live and work and operate in a technological regime or something, right? But I guess what I was saying, which doesn't contradict that, I agree. But like there are probably technologies that existed in the past that have halakhic consequences that just don't exist anymore because no one uses those technologies anymore, right? And so, and there may not be any prior art relevance, one thing to the next, right? If that makes sense. And so, like, not everything is going to have a linear thread or progression through time where it builds on each other. I mean, and not to say you should rest on that assumption. So that's fair. And I think as long as there are some Jewish communities, rabbinic authorities who are grappling with it, then you only need, I mean, in theory, you only need one to set the stage and pave the path, right? And so
assuming he could pave the path, right? So like initially it didn't work out for Maimonides, right? His books were burnt. Later on, we see
he was vindicated. Yeah,
correct. He was vindicated. Yeah. So the fear is that, again, I have the luxury of waiting and sort of like seeing how things let the cards fall where they may, and then Judaism sort of could react accordingly. These changes are happening like in your lifetime, and the problem is, when you're speaking with authority, you're also speaking with the authority of God's name right now. So, and this has, you're coming and saying, you're coming and telling like a community, right? We're doing X because of Y, because God said so. Now, a year later, you have a new reality, which sort of means now that's not relevant anymore. So either you're saying, I was wrong, this was okay now we understand better. And then maybe you should have been careful with using the words because God said, like I'm saying, that there's an how your community is also relating to your leaders based on the validity of what you're saying. Or you're saying, no, we're still saying no, even though it's clear that we in theory could do it, we're still saying no because we're connecting to this older idea. So this is where Jacob and I have this our argument about electricity, right? Comes to electricity, in theory, it's not a problem. It might not be a problem. Comes a rabbi and says like, no, I'm still saying it's no. And we see today how wonderful it is because if we were using electricity, obviously our Sabbath wouldn't have been the same. Great. Now, 50 years from now, it's even more clear that it's not a problem. You're not going to be able to still say, because a lot of Jews are growing up thinking like turning on this light right now is like, that's what God said you can't do. That's going to ruin relationships with God when it's clear that that's not what it's talking about. So then you're going to have to use a different language. Are you even prepping that language? Are you even discussing how you would discuss that? And also, you don't even necessarily have time to say like, okay, Chezi, let someone grapple that. And in 100 years, they'll say that and it'll be like, how, this was so obvious then. You might have to have this conversation in 5 years and then again, a different conversation 5 years after that. That is a crazy speed up of these changes. And, that's not what you're seeing on the ground, right? Instead, you're seeing on the ground people still dealing with like much older arguments that they're still trying to, make their way through. But I want to just be polite and invite Yoav to say a few words.
Hi.
Hello,
Hi,
Yoav.
everybody. I can either say hi and we close the show, or you can leave and I can stay as you wish. To those who are waiting for me to play the clarinet, it is midnight here, and my wife is sleeping in another room, so no concert today.
Was it a bad conversation, Yoav, that we need to play a clarinet? Was it?
No, somebody wanted. Somebody is here to hear my playing.
Aha.
And there is somebody who has been very persistent in preaching the grand history of culture, of African culture. And I would recommend a book called Guns, Germs, and Steel. And it looks at the particular geography of the world. You have one big continent that is horizontal, going from China to Europe. And so it has the same climate bands. And that is where culture can thrive because of the mobility of people from left to right. The other continent, like Africa and the Americas, that are arranged top to bottom, now vertical, they have varying bands of climate, which discourage the movement of people. And once, even when a culture rises in such a geography, it will sometimes die and there will be nothing to replace it. This is why human culture evolved along the horizontal big continent. As to Judaism and Zionism in Israel, I guess that guests such as we had today don't appreciate the amount of miracles that have been seen in the last generation. You have to start with the War of Independence, the War of 48, when unarmed civilians go to the States fighting against the armies of some 3 or 4 well-armed, proper army states. You have to go through the 6-day war when you have the miracle of winning the war in the first 10 minutes without anything going wrong. And then you have to go through the miracle of the War of 73. And then you have to go through the miracles performed in this war of the last 3 years. When it all accumulates, the truth of divine intervention becomes undeniable. And people don't understand what a secular Jew like me is doing in a religious discussion. I'm an engineer. I just cannot deny the facts. And when divine intervention is plain, and it comes as often and as regularly as the sun rising in the east, then what is a secular engineer to do? And we always said that we can also only see the back of God. We see the history. I have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow. And if you ask me, and Chezi would agree, we are unworthy of this grace, because we cannot agree among ourselves even on the basics. We all agree that we want to be light to the Gentile, light to the nations. Cannot agree what this light means. If Chezi will try to pray in the city of Tel Aviv, somebody will shut him up and say, well, we don't pray Jewish prayers in this city, because this is a secular city. If a Muslim will try to pray in Tel Aviv, nobody will stop him. And this is what the citizen of Tel Aviv is calling light to the nations. We'll have to settle that. And yes, the contradiction is immense, and it's getting very often to an unbearable. I don't mind the psychology. I don't mind living with philosophical contradiction. The physical contradiction is becoming unbearable, as it happens in the States at the moment, as it happens in England at the moment. That's the zeitgeist. What else?
I do have one question before we wrap for Chezi, but maybe Yoav, you have a point of view on this too. But I find that it is still difficult sort of to define what is a Jew. And I know some people are obtuse or don't necessarily want to get a real answer to that question. But I was thinking while you were talking earlier, Chezi, that does it make more sense to almost frame it as a family? Because, you know, nation state is a window of historical context, whereas a multitude was gathered around physically at Sinai. And what did they have in common? They happened to be at Sinai. I mean, they might have had other things in common previously, but at that point there was an irreducible commonality to them. Yes, they were all there. And at that point, they were related. So is that maybe the Goyish legible way to talk about it? You know, I don't know. Because I do think like it's important to be able to have a legible answer to that, because it is unique amongst religions. It's unique amongst nations, ethnicities, whether it is or isn't any of those things, right? Hard to pin down. You know it when you see it.
Well,
the Nazis never had a hard time finding out who the Jews are. So, you know, but they're not the ones that are going to define it. So
in the book of Genesis, I don't remember exactly which exact verse, but it starts talking about the large families were called mishpachot ha'adama, the families of the earth. And later on, it's called Baratzotehem begoyehem, in their lands, not their lands, in their countries for their nations, right? So there's the Torah is letting us know there's a degradation from families into nations ultimately, and in familiar relationships, the relationship is of peace, of families that marry each other, that exchange ideas, that are going to picnics together, and sometimes there's war, but that is what's less common, and generally it's a structure that allows for peace. Once we're talking about goyim, right, which we're also called like goyim, which is like a nation, right, which is like a nationality, then the natural status is having actually war, okay, which is eventually we want to get to a place which lo yisagoy go cher, right, a nation will hold up against a nation like a sword anymore, which is the understanding is that usually nations are at war, and the miracle is they won't be anymore. The miracle will happen because we will revert back to the familial bonds. And in the familial bonds, obviously, we're supposed to have the conversation. Again, going all the way back to what we were saying. In Israel, where can you see this demonstrated? You can see this demonstrated with the percentage of the people fighting in this war in Israel right now, which is still significantly higher than what you see in Ukraine. You see a nation that wants life. You see a nation that goes out to bring back one body and go through graves and dig them out. And every soldier has pictures of his teeth so they could find out exactly what it looks like. And all the country is vested inside of this as well. That's how a family behaves. Now, how amazing would it be if we could act that way, not when we're looking to bury our dead, right? At our worst. But how amazing would it be if we act as a family together, when we're building the budget, when we're working on AI technology, when we're desalinating, all the systems that we're doing. Why are we not the fact that Saudi Arabia, the Abraham Accords, and if we could help make the desert green everywhere, how is that not a blessing to the world? So we must act as a family. And I believe the world could look at us. The world already looks at Israel in a certain amount of, and I would say this is also what relates to some of the anti-Semitism, right? In a time where there's so much uncertainty and such a meaning crisis, a people that claim to be the people of a meaning, that have a vision, right? So people are looking around saying, we see they could do miraculous things. It's undeniable, like Yoav was saying. Nevertheless, we still see tons of infighting, tons of fumbling. And we need to show people what that actually looks like. What does a nation look like when it acts like a family? That is the model that we're supposed to be offering to the world. So I very much agree with what you're saying about us moving back into the family model.
Yeah. Do you really have to Hezi, or can you entertain one more question?
I actually have a real question though. I see Claire as now I'm looking back at this again. Let me be a rabbi, me. Is that what I sound like? And if it is, I'll really
No.
I don't know.
Don't take the bait. Don't take the bait.
Yeah, I wouldn't take the bait. But do you have to go, Hezi?
You could ask. Go ahead, ask.
Okay. So the final question to wrap this up is basically, do you think that international trade is good from a Jewish perspective? Because basically the way I see it is Judaism does have an idea that we should minimize poverty in the world and help the global poor. But in my view, the best way to help the global poor is through international free trade because of the Hayekian idea of spontaneous order, right? You mentioned Hayek the other day, and I think that markets are information processing systems which help the poor by incentivizing innovation and investment in the lowest class communities, I should say.
If the general question, I'll answer it differently. Judaism should adopt the best system possible, obviously, that allows for, to heal the world. I can't tell you exactly what's that best system once, assuming everyone is acting properly and everyone's doing this for heaven's sake. I'm not sure what system will be the best system, but this goes back to the idea of creating nations. If Hayek's formula makes the most sense through a Jewish prism, then that's obviously what should be adopted.
Okay, but I guess my question would be, from what you know about economics, do you think free trade is the best system for alleviating poverty on the globe?
I think it's the best trade considering the parties we're playing with. So I think with what we have, right now, creating a sabbatical year or having versions of wiping all debt, our system is not built for that, right? I mean, hence Rabbi Hillel had to make his ingenuity, and with his ingenuity, make this idea called the Prusbul, right, which allowed us to keep on, because if you were going to wipe the debt, then no one would loan money anymore. So you have to take into consideration how humans are behaving and also what's happening around you as well. So given that case, for the way humans are participating right now in the world arena, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, and I agree. And I would say this is one of the reasons why I'm generally skeptical of Trump's tariffs, because of the fact that our global economic system was not built to be able to lock off international trade because of issues of comparative advantage and information processing being most effective with free trade. But yeah, I would generally agree that our system, as it is in a free market, is the best system we have for alleviating poverty. What the ideal system is, I don't know enough about economics to say for certain, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, don't forget opponent processing. Sometimes the best solution is somewhere in the middle. And sometimes the best solution is even not a fixed quantity, but a function. Perhaps globalism that is going up and down in time, that is increasing sometimes and decreasing sometimes, perhaps this is the best solution to the system.
I mean,
Perhaps.
during Joseph's time, right, you could see, I mean, there's also like a huge growth in scale of a huge booming population in Egypt at the time as well. But, it's seemingly the invisible hand of Joseph, right, going around. He's doing this mass urbanization. He's moving people around, there's different elements that make sense at different times. I would say the core of obviously what, at least as far as what Judaism is telling us, is, you have to make systems that are aware of the poor, the widow, the orphan, right? So that's ultimately, it's telling you any system that you're participating in. Obviously, the kings shouldn't have tons of women and shouldn't have horses and shouldn't have gold. So the priorities are already set straight. It's not an issue that wealth is bad, but the idea of the trillionaire, right, or being just like a libertarian, I don't know if that jives necessarily with Judaism in that sense. It's also because Judaism's focus is not about the individual, it's about the collective.
I understand, but in order to assess what is best for the collective, we have to understand what economically alleviates poverty and the best. And so far as I can tell, the best economic theories say that capitalism alleviates poverty better than socialism.
We had this experiment in Israel. We started as a communist country, and we moved gradually. I mean, especially after 73, we moved gradually into a more capitalist liberal system, and it helped. We founded the movement from a socialist economy to a more capitalist liberal economy. Was of benefit to us at the time.
At the end, go to your point, Jonathan. I know when God tells Abraham, right, the families of the earth will be blessed through you. At the end, quote unquote, like after the final wars in prophetic times, right? In redemption times, we have that Egypt is called again the families of Egypt, right? Egypt is also called my people, which is usually reserved for the Israelites. So not only is there a sense that everyone comes back to realizing that they actually need to be functioning as families, as communities, but that everyone is chosen in that sense, right? Once everyone starts acting like that family, and the nations of the world were blessed through you, that's the blessing. The blessing is that then we've completed our mission in that sense. Everyone is shining brightly. Everyone is participating properly. And why, interestingly enough, you could actually write the Bible in Greek, right? Because of how beautiful the language is, right? It would be sort of counterintuitive, but the idea is that no, there is and it connects to a specific verse. But the idea is that the beauty of Japhet, which we're saying Yefet, where the sons of Noah, where let's say Greek comes from, if it's happening within the tent of Shem, obviously we need to appreciate the beauty and the ideas as well that are coming out from there too. So going back to Hayek, the ideas that the worlds have to offer, as long as they're oriented properly, could be not only could be a benefit, but perhaps those are part of the divine sparks that we have to rectify and raise.
Yeah.
I want to address the issue of how much time should Chezi be talking in this broadcast. There are all sorts. There are monologues, like Paul van der Klee will have, can have his 2-hour monologues. And there are estuaries, which everybody gets equal time to speak. And there are all sorts of intermediate arrangements. This today was an arrangement in which Chezi took most of the time. It is one of possible arrangements. I mean, we could have a more free, equal conversation some other time.
Thank you for that clarification. I would just point, if there's someone on here that felt like they weren't heard, and like, I hope it's not because I was trying to take any more time. Everyone's welcome to talk.
No. We got on here ostensibly to talk about that particular issue, and I asked you to give us context about the nature of your, I don't know, dispute or conversation or whatever with Jacob, and of course there's a lot to get on the table, and yeah, I was fine with it. No, I mean, the peanut gallery today has been awfully harsh and maybe uncharacteristically
It's so Claire.
agitated.
Claire wants us to join the secular Cordonism. You got to appreciate her efforts. She doesn't give up. So I guess like A for effort, and like we all should learn from Claire that we should all be blessed with her tenacity and devotion. We should all be as devoted to God as Claire is devoted to national secular Cordonism. I don't know. I hope you seem very intense. Paul, I hope you're doing well. I hope the family are doing well and the married kids are doing well. And if there's any grandchildren, I don't know. I hope they're doing well as well. Not yet. You're on mute.
Still on mute.
Still on mute.
Doesn't seem like he hears us saying he's on mute.
Can't hear you.
I cannot unmute him.
I don't know.
Can I unmute him?
No, you can't
Not
unmute.
No.
I don't think you can unmute somebody against their will. Oh, let me see. Nope. It says their mic isn't connected.
Yeah. I don't know.
All right, Paul, if you have grandchildren, blink twice.
Anyone that criticizes Israel, I shut it off. That they can't. Until Paul joins us.
Oh, still can't hear you, but you came off mute.
Yeah, now. Try now.
No, but I still want to. We should all take a moment to just thank Paul for putting all the time and effort into this TLC because we're all better off for it. I don't know when you jumped on. Did you hear the conversation that that Jonathan and I started about like our?
Yeah, I was from the beginning, from when it started in Jacob's channel. Maybe you had it before. So I'm quite the beginning of Jacob's channel, but I was a lot of time in the chat, and I sort of I cannot split my attention. So I had some of it, and some had quite fun with the chat.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Here we are.
No grandchildren yet. Still praying. Is why on this channel and not on the other channel, or is it both channels?
It's everything, I think.
It's also on Claire's channels as well.
I don't know about that, but I just shared it on Jacob's channel, my channel. That's
And
it.
Rando's got it.
And we gave our disclaimers about Jacob and Zionism. So like, it's been done.
We didn't give the disclaimers, but I cautiously avoided bringing up the Z word before it had to be brought up. Maybe we can do that next time.
Everyone knows. Everyone knows the skinny.
Everyone knows at this point. Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
point, right?
exactly. It's all
Come
good.
on, yes.
Talk to us, Paul. What are your insights?
Well, I don't have any insights. I'm just, I've been reading this book on on revolutionary Iran. And, obviously in the United States, there's this big conversation between Christianity and the public good. And so to me, what's going on in Israel is just a fascinating additional example of people working through these issues. And, Yoav talking about, the development and continued transformations happening in Israel with respect to, you had the kibbutzim and the socialism, and now more of a market capitalism. And, it's just been fascinating reading the history of Iran with just all of the different changes and permutations and, mixing all this revolutionary language with an attempt to be sort of a particular kind of fundamentalism. I mean, it's just such a live issue right now in the world. So I'm fascinated to hear about the Israeli experiment and all of this too.
Oh, these are these are such amazing times. Again, I've said this in the past already, which I think like we are in biblical times today, and how fortunate we are that we have an ancient book and ancient ideas to go back to and look at. I also think that's why I was mentioning how it's the rise of anti-Semitism, because very much when we're looking for meaning and we're looking for direction, when there's a people that's like 3,000 years old that's still holding on to some sort of idea that seems very strange to many people, and it really is part of the discussion. I mentioned, as I'll return to this, there was this discussion that Nick Fuentes had with this insane anti-Semite, and I sent it around to some people in my community. I'm like, if you could handle stomaching this, I think it's worth like watching till the end. And there's a lot of the classic anti-Semitism there, right? Like maybe some blood libels, all good stuff. However, there was a real discussion there, which I almost think that like Nick Fuentes is going to end up like going a 180. I think he's going to end up being like a champion for Jews at the end of the day, like in the path he's going. And I also love his fingers; they're very, very long. If anyone notices, he's very animated. Either way, when he's talking, he's mentioning how the Jews were never allowed. In short, basically, the Jews were never allowed to assimilate, aside from their own rigid understanding of their converts and how they go about certain things. They're constantly seeing as second class, and there's anti-Semitism, and they're being kicked out nonstop. So they're also being forced both internally and externally to stick together. I mean, we see Haman already, the terminology he's using, like, these people, they do their own thing, they're random. It's like, you can't ask for like a beautiful, more scripted, like sort of anti-Semitism, like attitude or description of the Jews. And as Nick Fuentes is going about this, he's like, everyone else is assimilating. He's like, you're never going to get these people to assimilate. Even the Dave Smith, he goes and says, like, which is like against Israel, against like the state of Israel, he's still loyal at the end of the day, push comes to shove, to the idea of him being a Jew. And there's something about him, again, going back to saying, Ben Shapiro can't be America first. And in the time of confusion and the lack of meaning, I understand why America wants to know who they are, right? This is a question that we're dealing with ICE as well. Who are we as Americans? What does that mean? Nick Fuentes then comes liberalism and invites Judaism to the conversation. Now, Judaism, after 3,000 years of doing their thing, says like, oh, we'll definitely join this party. but we're not looking to become like everyone else. Then you have this crazy thing where these people actually get a land, at which he's like, I almost admire that. He's like, that's fantastic. He's like, why can't we have in America what Israel's doing? He's like, but instead we have Israel and Israel. And then I have this other body of Americans, of Jewish Americans in America influencing America as Jews, though, not as America First people. And as a Jewish person, I could tell you, and as a dual citizen, he's correct, which is, I love America, and I mentioned this before. I think it's like a divinely inspired country. All the good stuff. They were all deists. I am Israel first because I'm a Jew and I have my connection to the land. I differentiate with the state of Israel, right? As a Zionist Jew, I have that understanding as well. Having said that, though, I am Israel first because I am Jewish first, which relates to God first. And Ben Shapiro, as an Orthodox Jew, of course, is Israel first in that sense. And when he tells Pierce Morgan, he's like, you're going to think I'm anti-Semitic when I say this, Pierce, but do you know that there's like a congregation of world Jewry that gets together? He's like, I know that sounds like anti-Semitism. He's like, but there is one. And he's correct. There is one. And us Jews, for the last 3,000 years, wherever we are looking at each other as a family and always reaching out to each other in a certain extent. And that is something that is very, very unique. So I need a beautiful anti-Semite like Nick Fuentes to remind us Jews that you are different and you're not like us and you're doing your own thing. Now, we ourselves as Jews are having this fight now inside Israel, which is like, who are we when we're fighting this battle, right? There's a whole controversy where the terminology is a little different in the States, but basically the head of the army, so to speak, in Israel, a lot of the soldiers, many of the soldiers had a patch, like, soldiers have all these patches. The patch says on it Messiah, or it says it's just a picture of the temple. And he wanted it removed. But then because of like outroar in the army, which is built on, in this war, a tremendous amount of reservists, right? So it's not just like your classic enlisted soldier. It's a guy that left his house that's going to be in the army right now. And everyone's like, what are you talking about? I want my patch on. The patches came back. There's this whole massive revival right now in Israel where you have a lot of secular Jews. Yoav was an example of here talking earlier about saying I'm a secular engineer, yet I can't deny what I'm seeing. You have a lot of Jews in Israel right now which are seemingly secular, yet are wearing these fringes, but not wearing the skull cap, or are there's all this new music that's emerging right now. Popular music, rock star levels, filling whole arenas full of all the diverse groups in Israel, all singing biblical songs, like in this like pop, religious pop, so to speak. And there's a big sense of revival, which is not uncommon also after war, but it's also sharpening this idea of like Jewish, and now like what does that actually mean? And I mean, to me, this is like, I'm on cloud 9 as far as I'm concerned, like that like this kind of conversation is happening, and hence it's like a great opportunity. But we are very much and the next election is going to be so vital in Israel right now. It is who we are. Who do we want to stand for? And it's at every level right now, from the judiciary to the government, to the parliament. Everyone is trying to figure out right now where that stands. And the people are all looking for a vision as well. And I'm not even looking right now for an answer. I am very much looking for the dialogue, because that is what we want. In where we see everywhere around us so much division. I go back to this. We don't have a civil war in Israel. It's called a milchemet achim, which means a battle of brothers. And even at our worst, we have to remember we're just civilians. We're all family. We're all brothers and all Americans. And I feel like there was just a YouTube dropped of, I can't remember who's there, but it's a whole group of Christian theologians, I think. We're just having a discussion from all different denominations, fairly recent, that just came out. I'm forgetting the name. Someone that Sam has beef with. But either way, it was beautiful. And I talk about the TLC all the time. And you you, Paul, are creating a space which is like, we must see each other. We must be able to do this together as a family. And that is the mission. So every state needs to show its chosenness by acting that way. Jews, Europe, everyone's being asked right now. And again, with ICE, who is your identity? Who are you? What do you stand for? Which, of course, everything should be done legal. People shouldn't be killed. All those good things that we, of course, all want. But it's fascinating to me. I think it would be foolish not to hold on to our religious apparatuses to be able to navigate this. We are the lucky few that still have something like this. And by we, I mean all of us of Abrahamic faith, but even Eastern religions. We have a system that in theory is supposed to help us, guide us through this. And it's getting to the money time. Again, as technology rises and as the information boundaries are being opened up, we can't go around like quibbling, which that's why I think the TLC will ultimately have success. Even if it's not the TLC itself, there was a podcast with Ben Shapiro, Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, and Jordan Peterson. And I sent it to Luke, where at some point, Matt Damon says that during COVID, he basically created estuaries to be able to talk to people. And he's like, that's what's needed right now. And I was like, loving seeing this. I'm like, this Hollywood guy is just saying what Paul is selling over here, right? What Paul is now, he's getting it through the monoculture. We're coming from religion. We obviously see how those things converge, but it's miraculous times. And it's not weird to me that like the religious conversation about all this is like, we can't avoid this framing. I know people know about this, but Javier Milei, the Argentinian prime minister, I think, he just spoke about wanting to have the Isaac Accords. And he still saying, there's the Abraham Accords. He's like, but there should be the Isaac Accords, and that should open up like a whole new, and again, like, why are you using that terminology? Like the fact that you're using that terminology, framing it that way, like, can't we see how it makes so much more sense for us to go put ourselves back into these archetypes? Now, once we allowed ourselves, so to speak, like Jonathan Pizot, like, to remove ourselves and to look from the outside as much as we can. We flirted with postmodernism. We understand the narratives need to be played around with. I get it. Now let's bring it back in so we could start talking that way. But again, I'm sorry if I ranted too much.
I want to comment about the expression, the rise of anti-Semitism. I don't see it this way. I see it ebbs and flows and goes up and down locally in geographies. It's always there. We have about 1 million Jews immigrating from Russia or the Russian-speaking countries to Israel. And not all of them are economic, it's not always my economic migrations. They report a lot of anti-Semitism. They say they couldn't get a proper place to study, they couldn't get a proper place to work because of being Jewish. They complain a lot about systematic prejudice in Russia. And that was, the socialist dream, the system that abolished all distinction between races and between religions. And nobody ever accuses them of dual citizenship. When they were Russian, they were Russian. They didn't have dual Israeli nationality. It's because of the anti-Semitism and because of they noticed the success of Israel that they have developed a national sense that wasn't there before. Because whoever wanted to go to Israel and found a Zionist state could have done it in the 30s or 40s. Why wait for the 70s? It is the case that the anti-Semitism caused Zionism, not vice versa, as it happened with my grandparents, as it happened with Herzl. Herzl was completely secular, 100% European, well integrated, until the Dreyfus affair. And again, as an engineer, there is no argument in my mind whether I should believe in America or in Israel, because I don't see the options. Yes, America has been very nice. America has been very nice to the Jews, as was Germany at the time. And things will improve in time in America, like in Poland. Poland, when it was a part of the Russian bloc, it was quite anti-Semitic. Now it's quite hospitable. I can see it in the selections in state to which I can travel. It used to be that I could not even dream of traveling to Poland or to Russia. Now I can. It used there's now certain places in the Persian Gulf that I can travel freely to. It used to be that I could travel to Egypt, and now I cannot. And it's going to be very soon that I cannot travel to France or to Britain. But that's the way of the world. Jews used to live in England like 12th century, and then there were Mr. Thorpe doesn't like it when I say that they were all killed. Maybe one or two survived. I don't want to be so categorically. End of speech.
Anti-Semitism has always been something that's sort of mystified me. It's certainly undeniable, and I think, as you say, Yoav, it rises and falls, but it's just not something I could ever figure out where it comes from, because there are always grievances between groups, but it's, and reading again in this Revolutionary Islam book, when Khomeini came into power, that was one of the things he really brought in. I mean, blaming the Jews, and it was like, I can understand why he blamed the Brits and the Americans, because they had done some real dirty deeds to Iran, but it's just you're just always on the list. And then I think about myself, because again, my father's line, in the Netherlands, that's as far as I can go back into the Netherlands before the surnames came in, or the Christian name, we had two names. And then I don't know why my great grandfather, I think he's the one that did it, sort of decided to assimilate and then when they came to America, I don't know what provoked them coming to America, but when they came to America, they really assimilated just among the Dutch, and then the Dutch just sort of get assimilated into the Americans, and now I'm just an American. Is it religious? Is it? So it's a topic that interests and fascinates me, but I still can't really make sense of it.
I think whenever groups will maintain an identity, there will be conflict, and people will always form into groups with distinct identities. Like, see what you have now in America between Democrats and Republicans. As long as these remain distinct identities, with time, it can get to bloodshed.
Yeah.
Because this is what people do. People form into groups, and groups fight each other.
Yeah.
Like, look what's happening in the Ukraine now.
Yeah.
What two nations were ever closer than the Ukraine and the Russians?
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I mean,
fair point.
we see this anti-Semitism start early on, very early on, Paul. Like even in the patriarchs, right? There's Abraham's family, then there's different people that are opposing that. There is someone that's trying to destroy Abraham, and Nimrod is trying to kill him. Lot is trying to replace him. If you look at how the story is being told, and they're each going their own way. Isaac has Avimelech, and there's who wants to destroy him. You have Ishmael that wants to replace him, and Jacob again. You have Laban that tries to destroy him, and you have Esau that's trying to replace him. There's always this thing that's happening, and we read the Bible knowing how it ended. We should really read the Bible saying it's the best show in town, right? It could always go a different way. I mentioned this earlier, how it could have been Egypt that was the chosen nation, right? Like I said, Egypt is the first nation to get God's revelation, right? They just get it in the form of plagues. But if they were better, if they were more morally connected, they would get it in Sinai. The attitude is that the fact that they even got the plagues just shows how advanced they were in a certain sense, how their understanding. But like Yoav said, I think being the other and not changing. I mean, this goes back. Right, Claire said over here, to raise the moral standards by teaching them the Noahide laws. So Nick Fuentes gets upset in this interview and says, why do we have the Rebbe, the Chabad Rebbe, convincing Reagan to instill the Noahide laws into law, during this educational process? This is something that happened. And I can understand why a Christian's coming being what's happening over here? Why are these Jews, how are they involved in this thing? Now, I think that's where the anti-Semitism is, for example, which is Hitler is saying it's going to be us or no one. It's not going to be these people right here. We're going to be the Ubermensch. Especially when there's this people that are constantly saying, and I'll quibble with how the word chosenness is used over here. I think it's far less sexy as people make it out to be. But when you're talking about people, again, in the world today, who are looking for meaning or who are looking for direction, there's always this group that won't go away and won't assimilate and is doing things their way. And I think that weighs on people and that sits on people. And that's very hard. And do we need to ask, is it not glaring enough that 30,000 civilians, legit civilians, are being massacred in days in Iran? In the world, silent. No Hollywood. The streets are not burning down. London's on a fire, right? Over 2 years, we'll take the Hamas numbers, 70,000 dead. Some of them are combatants, but let's pretend whatever people are just throwing out that number that, that's genocide. It's all the things, all the horrible, all the bad things. I don't know. It must be, it's clearly bigger than that.
I just want to know if Claire is among the Noahides. I mean, is that what Claire has done now? Is she, because I look at the 7 Noahide laws, at least that AI gins up, and it's almost all of them C.S. Lewis would list in his Tao. That these are very common laws throughout the world that people broadly have agreed upon.
Hence, according to many rabbis, Christians are already Noahides, right? So it's not really it's not a discussion in that sense. I would say though, Doug Wilson and his escapades. So that's also interesting in Israel because we have this big tension of the draft, specifically post-war right now, and the ultra-Orthodox refusing to draft, saying what I think are heretical things like we rather die than be drafted, right? So this is it's a very, very big tension. So right now you have 70,000 people, Orthodox Jews, ultra-Orthodox, that are AWOL, so to speak, or registered as AWOL because they're not drafted. And their real claim is it's not that we don't understand why you want us to draft. When you stop being quote unquote secular, we'll draft. we'll join. Like, it's not that we're against the army, we're against you're calling it a melting pot. I'm not looking to change who I am. You're looking to educate me into this new idea. Now, it's very easy when two values, one's when you see a clear difference between them, picking the right one. But now you have a question of like, okay, it's very important for the army to have diversity. And that's why on our bases, we want to have the fitness teachers are going to be a woman, or this is going to be a woman. Come the ultra soldiers and communities saying, we'll join. I don't want any women on my base. Now, the nation needs to understand that if we're a family, then the priority is having these people join the army and fighting, right? That means we're all okay that there won't be the diversity there, because then they'll come. But then people are like, no, we must have the diversity. Then you have to ask yourself, like, that's looking like it's turning into your own version of religion right now, where you're saying, I have to have this thing, and you're not understanding, and you're getting lost because you decided to put democracy or liberalism before Judaism, and you've forgotten that it's a Jewish state that is playing a democratic game.
Just to comment how foolish this whole business is. It's the left trying to think that it can overcome Judaism. That is somehow that the liberal progressive vision will overcome Judaism, as if any force in the world ever managed to scratch Judaism. So they think they're going to recruit this large group of people and give them guns. Say that they do. And now you have a group of 100,000 people, well armed, obeying the rabbis and not the Supreme Court. What happens next? I mean, the last thing I would have done as a lefty would be give them guns. Just that they think that the moment they will be recruited into the army and be given guns, they will immediately become progressive lefties.
Oh, that's
Just,
interesting.
I mean, it's so stupid that you couldn't believe that it's true.
Yeah, and I agree. And so one of the things is I've talked to many conservative and Reform Jews, and whenever I hear, especially one person, I'm not going to name names, but he says he's worried that Israel, if it becomes more religious, it'll become like Iran, because that's what he sees halacha as. Because conservative and Reform Jews are generally, in my experience, very ignorant of what actual Judaism, actual Torah Orthodox Judaism teaches, that they think if you embrace it, you'll be like Iran.
Gobbledygook.
Yeah, again, this is what the left says. But it's the stupidity of it all, because, I mean, Israel should know. It's their granddad and dad that was the religious guy. I mean, they should know that that this is not about being Iran. But anyway, the Jews were not Iranian when they were in Iran. When they were conservative in Iran, why should they be Iranian in Israel?
I would say, Kirk, that we have to differentiate between a Jewish state, which is our current reality. We have a religious state, which is actually an undesirable model, which would be like Iran, and we have a halachic state, which is like really what we're discussing right now. So the Jewish state would really be, it's the state of the Jewish people, which is the state of Israel, and it was expressed in the Declaration of Independence. And there's the law of return, and there's nation-state law, and there's a national identity, and there's a religious identity, and there's a status quo, so to speak. And and there's these tensions that rise from time to time, and that's what I was discussing earlier. There's the religious state, like you're talking about right now, which is like coercive religious observance, like Iran or Saudi Arabia or Afghanistan, or ideological dictatorships like China or North Korea, right? So this is, and I would say obviously Western countries have their own limited imposed like anti-religious, coercion, like, you can't have any burqa, or you can't have circumcision, right? Or you can't do kosher slaughter, which is also its own version of, let's say, coercion, right? And I would say, obviously, Judaism is not looking to impose religious behavior on the individual, okay? And anyone that's familiar with the Talmud or the halachic sources know that the enforcement mechanisms mentioned in biblical or rabbinic texts ultimately are neutralized by the tradition itself, right? And this is what we offer our Muslim brothers and sisters, a way to do this as well. But the legal conditions for punishments are actually sharpened to a point where it's basically impossible, as you see in many different places, which is the religious state is not on the agenda. And even if most of the citizens are observant, that's not really what we want. What we want is a halachic state, which is one that recognizes that Jewish law is the foundational norm of legislation, right? There's a famous judge, Supreme Court justice named Menachem Alon. He had his monumental work on this was Jewish law. It's just Mishpat Ivri, basically, but it's relevant to read. But just like the Jewish people returned to their land and to their language and to their sovereignty, we should also return to our unique legal tradition, right? Which is independent of British mandate law or Ottoman law or definitely what people are doing in the States, because it's not really relevant to us. And the two key elements of a Jewish law would be the source of sovereignty, right? Which is obviously that's a philosophical question, which is, where does my authority originate from, right? So, a modern state would say it's coming from the people. In Israel, it's coming, let's say, from the Knesset, right? Which, again, like I said, the problem is the state replaces God, is the ultimate authority.
Except that the Supreme Court denied it.
Correct.
We used to think that, but now the Supreme Court says that the Knesset is not the source of authority, but universal progressive thought is.
Right, but I would say what Kirk was referring to. So let's say the halachic state I'm talking about, God is sovereign, and the divine authority is the source of all the state power, including democracy. Right. So then, if the way a state like this would, and by the way, if once a Jewish law has legal standing, right, I could take many of the laws of the Knesset that are already done, and then I could recognize them under Jewish law. And then it's no longer, I don't have this problem anymore that it's considered like Gentile courts, or this is now, it gets a Jewish stamp. And
fine. But what I'm saying that in order for the system to move your way, you need certain amount of stability. If the legal system in Israel, if the constitution in Israel was stable, I would say you are daydreaming. What's happening is now that the Supreme Court has denied the authority of the Knesset to legislate, you are back to square one. And from here, any idea might catch, and yours might.
Wait, did I hear you? You said that the Supreme Court denied the ability of the Knesset to legislate?
Yes.
Wow.
And if I may respond to you, Hezi, I agree with you 100%.
Because it's like the state. What is the state in the UK? They didn't used to have a Supreme Court at all, and now they have of late instated the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court is basing itself on European human rights laws and nullifies parliament laws. The same thing is happening in principle in Israel when the liberal progressive Supreme Court is basing itself on universal humanitarian laws and judging. They claim the authority to cancel parliament laws according to that measure. Yes, and therefore Hezi's vision might come true.
Well,
but
I would just stress a halachic state doesn't dictate a system of governance. Okay, like democracy could still remain the choice of the people, And again, there's sources in our Jewish law to allow for that. Individual freedoms and basic human rights are still going to be preserved. Not all rights are recognized by liberal culture or are defined identically in Jewish law, but all universally recognized human rights are still going to be upheld. And freedoms are still going to be protected, right? Eating non-kosher food, violating the Shabbat, dressing freely, cultural expression, all that thing stays. Now, there wouldn't be an official recognition of same-sex marriage, or the state wouldn't, an event of, let's say, a pride parade, it could still occur, right? Jewish law doesn't intervene in private life, like what I'm just getting into what Yangan was saying. There's what happened in the public forum, and there's what's happening in the public forum as well. But I think it's a red herring people, play around with, and
Yeah.
Public desecration of Shabbat would be a problem, though, probably, right?
Yeah, definitely government funded, right? You could be open to ideas of, let's say, if people want to open up like their own private version of doing certain things, there could be like more leniency to that kind of idea. There's also parties that are interested to tango. I'll say, I don't want to use the word leniency, but sorry, go ahead.
Me?
Oh, I thought someone was going to say
No,
something.
keep going.
I was going to say that we've experienced Judaism again for 2,000 years with building tremendous amount of fences. I'm not saying we're there yet, but as we phase shift, there could be a room for a conversation where those fences not only could be removed, need to be removed, because now they will allow for a better expression of said holiness. Now, obviously, that needs to be done very carefully, and we want to be aiming towards that. But we have to stop looking at that as like, bad rules or ancient rules that we want to escape for, rather seeing that these are things that we want to now, vessels that we want to refill with new meaning that are still are being sustained by our ancient sources. So there could be a lot of discussion also, specifically with AI and technology, what Shabbat looks like, what are things that people actually could participate on. There are very hard lines or extreme lines that people take publicly. Many secular Jews have an aversion to a specific version of Judaism. That's in no means the only version of Judaism. There are many, many different languages that one could be speaking, and that could be a lot more interesting or attractive to the people of Israel. So I would even say, going back to Doug Wilson or Christian Nation, what is the nation that's being offered? What is he offering people? I mean, it seemed like Sam Harris actually had an interesting discussion with Doug Wilson quite recently. And I think he thought maybe Doug sounded like a little more sound or rational than he thought he was going to sound. But like Sam is a perfect example of someone that has like this red herring version of like, what he's up against. And I don't know too deeply into Doug Wilson's whole agenda, but there could be a conversation which Christian nationalism is offered in a way that's a lot more palpable to most Americans. And I don't want to say by being more progressive about it or being more watered down. We don't have to use that terminology necessarily, because just because you're more strict doesn't mean you're more pious or you're doing it the right way.
A second, I want to answer Claire. She reminds us that the Supreme Court also nominated the superintendent over the executive branch. And the question that Jacob and I are asking ourselves, who's going to win? It's the Supreme Court against both the executive branch and the parliament. And the answer to the question is whoever the American president supports, obviously. And therefore, the Americans should not complain if Israel is trying to influence American politics, because it's the only way that we can influence our own politics.
Yeah.
Wow.
The only thing I was going to say is to Hezy's point about the difference between a halakhic state and a religious state is that the friends of mine that I've been talking to in the Reform and conservative Jewish communities, generally speaking, can't distinguish between a halakhic state and religious state. They all think it's the same thing, and that's where the confusion comes in. And I don't think that most Reform or conservative Jews in America, at least, are generally knowledgeable enough about halakha to understand the nuances you're providing, Hezi.
I've only got a few more minutes left here, but one of the things I'm curious is that obviously these different religious traditions are they're substantively different in some ways, and part of what I wonder about is when I listen to even not just Claire, but as I'm reading this book on revolutionary Iran, and as I listen to the Jewish reiteration of law, Christianity, especially Protestant Christianity, sort of demotes law as a category in certain ways. I mean, we sort of get that from Luther. Luther set up this deep spirit law division. I really wonder how that plays out as these three massively important, even though, Jewish religion, the numbers of people are very small compared to the Islamic and the Christian. But I wonder about how those differences play out in terms of the kinds of political things that evolve.
There's actually discussions now, which I'm very happy about, that are happening between rabbis that are asking this kind of question, because it's a lot of rabbis that are also part of trying to reach across the aisle, so to speak, in Israel right now with all the tensions going around. So you have many different sides speaking, many different rabbis speaking, and religious leaders speaking with secular leaders. And this also has to do with a lot of this revival, this religious revival, so to speak, or spiritual revival. And the rabbis are sort of being asked, is there wiggle room? How would you change this? Do we need to actually keep all these laws? Are all these laws relevant? And it's being asked in a certain sense for the first time from like a genuine place, not a place of like, I got you, sort of going back to Korach when he comes in front of Moses, like, aren't we all holy, right? So there's a sense of like, we don't need this anymore. But there's a true sense of like, why am I still doing this? Is this still relevant? And the rabbis are being very careful to answer this, but it's a give and take, which is, if you, the people, show me that you were really there and you're leveling up, then the answer then will be, then yes, this is not necessary anymore, right? Wow. But rabbis, it needs to be identified as genuine, and it needs to be identified as like that there's something there. When we said this earlier, when the prophet comes and says like, I don't need your sacrifices, right? Ultimately that's not my claim. And this would go to obviously a Jesus claim, which is like, do as they say, but not as they do, right? So there's a sense which is, I've been stuck for 2,000 years doing as they do, because that's all I got. All I got is doing as they do. Or as they claim they did, right? When I'm coming back over here, I have opportunity again to now do as they say. The rabbis will give that their stamp of authority if they really see me trying to navigate and orient towards what they say. This would, of course, require me to know a little of what they do. I mean, don't do as they do as they say. It would require me to actually know some of this information. So I can't just come into the field saying, I want whatever I want. So I have to be a real player. So I need to arm myself with knowledge. Having said that, that is a real conversation. Like while this is clearly something that today symbolizes an observant Jew or a Jew, this is not from the Bible, right? This is added later on, way later on. Maybe when I'm praying, I need to have it on, but definitely not usually speaking. the fact that now the populace in Israel, so many secular soldiers asked to have the fringes made for them. They want to wear the fringes. The fringes are actually something that's in the Bible itself. So a rabbi was asked about this, and that was his response. When I was in school, if I was caught with this in my hand, even if I was playing ball, you would get called out. Like, put it on your head. Always put it on your head. Like, you have to have it on your head all the time. Don't walk around with it on your head. So as far as I'm concerned, this is law, even though I know very much so that it's not law. Now the response of the rabbi was like, when someone said, like, these people are doing this without wearing this, he's like, fantastic. He's like, that's what it says in the Bible, and this was anyways added on. And that switched because he recognized they're not wearing that hat, not because they're rejecting God right now. They don't require that garment anymore. That is very interesting to me. That is the language that I'm very much looking to get into. And that's also what I think of. We are seeing the expression of the Jewish person come back to his land. That's going to express itself in music, in culture, in politics, and obviously in the religion itself. The tensions we're seeing now in Israel politically, supercharged by the war that obviously has tremendous amount of religious undertones, has fast-tracked this conversation to who are we and how do we define ourselves. But there's room for wiggle room.
Claire asks, when we build the temple, how do we know which of the rabbis are going to be the priests?
None of the rabbis will be priests. Priests will be the priests. If she means who are the rabbis that will be in the Sanhedrin, right? We need a whole group of them. I would say the ones who agree to sit with the other ones, that will be a good start. Anyone that says, I'm not going to sit with that guy, he's probably not the candidate we want. Anyone putting up fences at this point is going to be a problem.
Yeah, she was asking about the temple, but yes, the answer about the Sanhedrin is also in place.
I have to leave, but I appreciate very much your hospitality, answering my questions. I think I could probably sit and talk with you guys for hours on these subjects because I find them absolutely fascinating. And
it's 1 o'clock here at a.m.
It is indeed late.
Wow.
My wife was supposed to text me hours ago to go away, but she didn't. So,
well, sleep well.
Well, actually, I'm now seeing that she did text me, and all she wrote was an hour. He said, because I said I'm only for an hour, and that was at 9:30. So
murder, she wrote.
Maybe we should call it.
All right.
This is a good time to end it.
Peace and tranquility to all.
Peace and tranquility.
All right, peace.